Hello. Hello. Welcome to the stream. Is my camera positioned weirdly? What if I turn it down a little? There we go. Welcome to the stream. It's day 2 of my birthday weekend. And today, as I mentioned yesterday, today it's all about me. No more community stuff. Just melody. But what exactly does that mean? You may ask, if you didn't see the tweet or the name of the stream or the name of the VOD if you're watching this after the fact. Well, in case you weren't aware, I am not just a VTuber. I am also an author, sort of. I haven't actually published anything yet, but I'm working on it. And as such, I have a lot of ideas for stories that have sort of built up into this big old multiverse. And I just, even though I have way too many stories already, probably more than I can actually get around to writing in my lifetime, I keep adding to it. Because I just can't resist. My imagination comes up with more stories and more characters and more plot lines and everything. And I just got it. I can't resist. I gotta use them. So I figured today what we would be doing, well, what I would do is I would go through all the stories that currently exist within my multiverse. Or the plot lines, because I haven't actually written all of them, obviously. I'm still in the process of writing my first series of novels. I haven't published them yet. You can read the work in progress. They're on my DeviantArt and my Wattpad. But it's still a work in progress. However, we're going to go through everything that's currently sort of... It exists, but it only exists in my mind. And there's a couple of reasons why I wanted to do a stream like this. Part of it was just like I want to be able to share the stuff I've made. I want to be able to get people interested in it. But you know, it's difficult to get people interested in stuff that doesn't exist yet. There's no content made for it yet besides like an image. Oh shit, I forgot my phone. Hold on, 1 sec. I need my phone to look at chat. Look at me, acting all professional. Didn't even grab my phone. Smart. Yeah, it's difficult. Like, besides a drawing here or there of a character, for the most part, there's not really all that much content that exists yet for my stories, and it's very difficult to get people interested in something that doesn't exist. So I figured if I do something like this, it might get people, you know, a little interested in maybe some of the stories that I'm coming up with. And if it does get some people interested in it, then, you know, I can sort of gauge which stories people are more interested in, and maybe that'll help me decide what to work on after I finish what I'm currently writing. But really, I just I want to share stuff, because like I come up with all this stuff, and I'm like, I want to show this to people. So, it's been like 5 minutes now. I guess let's go over to the. Which scene was I using? This one, I think. This is what I'm going to be using. Don't worry that I'm covering part of it. I'm gonna like zoom in and all that jazz. You can see there are 18 slots here. The reason for that, my multiverse currently has 17 different worlds. However, sorry, I had to sneeze. However, there are a couple stories that I kind of like to play it a bit coy, what world they're part of. So I kind of prefer to to just sort of leave it a mystery. And, sort of the idea would be, I'm not going to advertise what world it's part of, just read the story yourself. But the story doesn't exist yet, so, Anyway, let's get some music here in the background. So we're not sitting in silence. And let's start going through them. Starting with the stories that I am kind of playing coy about what world they're part of. Which I've decided to do as the realm of question mark. This wasn't in the thumbnail because this isn't an official world. This is just an icon I made yesterday to represent stories that I'm hiding what world they're part of. And there's a couple of these. Starting with the story that I am currently in the process of writing. The Killing Nexus. Hold on, I don't have my list open. Why don't I have my list open? I have my list open now. So The Killing Nexus is a story heavily inspired by... I was going to try and draw the protagonist's face, but I'm now realizing I probably don't have enough space for that. The Killing Nexus is a story inspired by the Danganronpa series, in which we have 16 more or less strangers that all experience the same strange dream in which they witness red cracks spreading across the sky before it finally shatters. When they awake from that dream, they find themselves in a mysterious facility with seemingly no exit. It's then that their host appears and informs them that what they... the host being a woman named C, the letter C, no relation to me, obviously. C informs them that their dream, supposedly, was actually a memory of the world ending. And C's good side, I'm doing like air quotations with my hands, even though you can't see them. C's good side was supposed to find someone who was strong of heart from their world and bring them into this new world that C is part of. However, C's good side found 16 individuals who were strong of heart and pulled all of them in. So now C has decided that the best way to... I'm losing my train of thought. That the best way to decide which of these 16 people should get to go into this new world is to host a killing game. The contestant that manages to kill one of the others without the rest of the group figuring out that they were the one who did it will be the one to survive, essentially. So that's kind of the gist of the story. As things go on, the group does their best to try and survive, as well as find a way to escape and solve the mysteries surrounding how they got here in the first place. Because there's a lot of things that seemingly don't make much sense. Hello, Theo. Hello, thank you for the raid. I totally wasn't expecting this again. I'm just now realizing I forgot to shout you out yesterday when you raided. Thank you for the raid. Mobile Suit Gundam, yeah. I hope you had a good stream. Hello Raiders, my name is Melody Sea Turtle, VTuber and author from Australia. Today, I am taking you on a trip through all of the stories that currently exist within my fictional multiverse, locked away inside my head until I finally have the time to write all of them. This is what I meant when I said yesterday that today's stream is going to be all about me. I just got done explaining the Killing Nexus, which is the story that I am currently in the process of writing. Rambling, let's go. Quick recap, it's basically my own take on the concept of the Danganronpa series. Have a good passionate ramble, thank you, Rai. Who else was here? Rai and Miko and Jesus. Thank you all for stopping by. Hope you had a good time at Theo's stream, and I hope you enjoy my ramblings. Anyway, as stated, the Killing Nexus is basically my take on the concept of Danganronpa, just sort of putting my own spin on things, and of course using my own cast of characters. Is the music still going? It sounds like it stopped. Okay, no, it was just transitioning between songs, I think. Hold on, where'd OBS go? Now, even though the Killing Nexus is taking me freaking years to write, and so it's probably going to be ages before I ever want to attempt something like it again, I do have an idea for a sequel. Which is currently called another Killing Nexus, because I am you'll come to realize by the end of this stream that I am absolutely terrible with names. So another Killing Nexus, similar to the first, features 16 contestants participating in a killing game, with the reward essentially being that they get to escape. However, this time, things are a little different. Rather than everyone having their own individual talent and whatnot, the main character has amnesia. They don't remember not only what their talent is, they don't remember anything. So they're more lost than normal in this killing game, and rather than a clean and sterile facility, they find themselves... the group finds themselves locked in what appears to be like an underground mine shaft or something that's been fitted out for the group to live there. The catacombs, as they're called. Also, the host, Miss C, doesn't actively participate this time. Instead, she's communicating, like, she's working from home, essentially. She's communicating through various TV screens or audio messages and whatnot, rather than appearing in person and taunting them the entire time. There are reasons for that, and there's a reason why the sequel exists. However, it's probably going to be years before I feel like writing something like this again, just because of how long the Killing Nexus is taking me. Now, there is one more story that I like to kind of play coy about what world it's from. And, hold on, I lost my list. There it is. And that is... Castaway Cove. So, Castaway Cove is a quiet little port town. Is that a thing? Is that the phrase? It's a quiet little seaside town where nothing much really happens. It's just... It's a very sleepy place, I guess. And so we pick up on our protagonist... Port town is the thing, thank you. We pick up on our protagonist, a young woman named... What was her surname again? Red Blanchett. Red is coming home for... after, like, her summer break, I guess? Question mark. However, things aren't quite normal. She comes home to her apartment and where she lives with her grandmother, and finds the entire place has been ransacked and torn apart. Worse still is that her grandmother is nowhere to be seen. There's markings all over the place that seem like a wild animal's torn through it, but police can't find any evidence that, like, they don't know what the hell's going on. Now, the detectives tell Red to stay out of it, but she can't help but feel like something strange is going on here. How did such a large animal get into the town without anyone noticing it? What exactly happened to her grandmother? What's going on? So, at the urging of one of her friends, a young boy from the local orphanage, she decides to try and investigate for herself. And together, they start to realize that there may be more to their quiet little town than they first thought. Now, the interesting thing about Castaway Cove is it was kind of partially inspired by a show called Once Upon a Time, if y'all have heard of that. I think that's what it's called. Basically, Once Upon a Time, all the characters are based on characters from fairy tales or Disney movies. The idea behind Castaway Cove was I kind of wanted to see if I could make a story where every character was based on or just taken from something in the public domain. So Miss Red Blanchett is my take on Little Red Riding Hood. The detective that told Red to stay out of it all is Sherlock Holmes. And Red's friend from the orphanage is Oliver Twist. And there's plenty more where that came from. And I just thought it was a fun little concept to try and work with, to see, if I could stitch together a story just by making my own take on all of these existing characters. And that's how Castaway Cove came to be a thing. The name is actually taken from a game that I made in Game Dev Tycoon during my first streamed playthrough. Then I was like, I like that name, I want to use it for something. And then when I came up with this idea, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And that's basically what that is. And that is all the stories that I currently like to kind of hide what world they're actually part of. Which means it's time to go to our first proper world. Get ready to hear the word Nexus a hell of a lot, because we're taking a look at the realm of Nexus. If you're wondering where all of my alert icon, not alert, where all of my redeem icons came from, they were originally made to represent the various worlds within my multiverse. So I don't remember if this one's still in use, but it was being used for something at some point. Anyway, the realm of Nexus is kind of the only world where the fact that this is all a multiverse really matters. It's the only world that's actually aware of the fact that all of these worlds are kind of interconnected. So before I explain any of the stories that exist within it, I'll just explain what the realm of Nexus is and how my multiverse works, because each world is kind of being held on the back of a giant turtle known as a world turtle, and they swim through the vast void known as the world sea. Certain worlds will have what's referred to as a nexus in them. This nexus can extend its reach outside of its own world and essentially offer protection for other worlds that are close enough. The realm of Nexus essentially sits at the center of the worlds that I use for my stories, offering protection for them and connecting them in its own way. as part of that protection, most of the characters from the realm of Nexus are from worlds that have been destroyed, as when a world when a world is destroyed, the Nexus can attempt to find an individual who is strong of heart and pull them into its world to save them from destruction. It also sort of creates a backup of all the characters, the places, the events that exist within that world, so that if an outside force, such as the corruption, were to throw the world off course, it can essentially restore it to a backup. However, in this particular realm of Nexus, the Nexus has an interesting view of things, and as a result, characters and items and all that sort of stuff from different worlds manifest within this world as what's referred to as effigies, recreations of things from other worlds. Because she wants to view her world, I should say it really, I kind of spoiled a little thing there. Well, it views the world as a place of endless possibility, and thus the realm of Nexus was created as an endless sea, dotted by countless islands, where these effigies can play out countless different stories and possibilities, essentially. But rather than focusing on those effigies, let's take a look at something a little more original. Nexus Island, the main story of the realm of Nexus and the reason why it was created. Nexus Island is an island that currently houses the... Oh, by the way, the icon for the realm of Nexus is a representation of the Nexus itself. It usually appears as like a large diamond with 4 smaller diamonds like circling it. But that's a bit difficult to represent, so I only drew 2. But Nexus Island is where the Nexus is currently held. There's a small village on that island where a group of survivors from destroyed worlds currently live, alongside a man who was the leader of a group called the Ancients, a group of people who were tasked with protecting the Nexus and nurturing it so that it could one day grow strong enough to protect other worlds. And my tea is going cold. That's the problem with doing a stream where the focus is talking. So, this man, his name is Alder. Alder is currently the only one of the Ancients that still remain, and since all the other Ancients are gone, he's instead been recruiting survivors from other worlds to help him with protecting the Nexus. Enter our main character, Kichiro. Kichiro, he comes from a fairly normal world and is a fairly normal guy. However, as it turns out, he's not quite so normal. He has a necklace with a padlock on it that he's never known. He received it from his father at some point in the past, and he never really knew where the key was. His father never gave it to him. His father never even told him about a key. However, upon arriving on Nexus Island, Alder recognizes the padlock and hands Kichiro a key. As it turns out, the lock was secretly a legendary blade that the Nexus had hidden away in another world, with the power to destroy the corruption and such. The corruption being a dark force that exists within the world sea that essentially just tries to destroy other worlds. So as such, Kichiro was essentially selected as the hero of the Nexus and had to try and stop the corruption wherever it reared its head. That's kind of the gist of what currently exists with Nexus Island, to not give too much away about like actual plot points. It was originally just created because like I was trying to come up with something where I could just use stuff from other worlds because I like crossovers. And it was originally going to be something similar to frickin' like it would. For those who don't know, before I decided to become an author, I originally wanted to be a game developer. So Nexus Island, I'd originally envisioned it with gameplay similar to something like Puyo Puyo or Puzzle and Dragons. That eventually got turned into Nexus Island being something more similar to Kingdom Hearts, with Kichiro going off to other worlds in order to save them from the corruption. But now it's more self-contained within the realm of Nexus. Because if he enters other worlds at like various points in their timeline, it's gonna raise confusion for where in that other world's timeline it takes place, you know? So instead I prefer to just have it self-contained. But speaking of islands with villages, there's another plot with another important character. Nexus Village, which was originally my idea for a frickin' gacha game set within my multiverse, but eventually evolved into something more. So, Nexus Village, once again, I lost how to say that. Our main protagonist is once again someone from a world who had been destroyed, but this time they have amnesia. Oh no, they don't remember anything. But they seem to have a surprising amount of control over light energy. You see, the Nexus spits out, alongside effigies, it spits out these power crystals that embody certain elements. Fire, light, nature, water, and shadow. I got the order wrong, but that's all 5 of them. But this unknown amnesiac has a strange amount of control over light energy. Before they can be beset by like the creatures in whatever cave they woke up in, they happen to be found by a robot who is also a survivor from another world, and they make their way out of the cave and essentially just try to find some sort of civilization. After meeting up with a few other people, they eventually find someone who's trying to set up a small village where survivors from other worlds, as well as more friendly effigies, can make their home in this wilderness. And so they... What was I freaking saying? The idea was that this was like, this is like a gacha game, or something similar to a gacha game, and so you'd recruit characters from other worlds, and they'd be like effigies and whatnot. And you'd go off to other islands just exploring places, and eventually the characters from Nexus Village would reach Nexus Island. However, it would be set long before... I think the original intention was that it would be set before the story of Nexus Island, before Kichiro arrived in this world. Which was partially why this is no longer my idea for the gacha stuff, because then that creates a confusing timeline. However, these two stories... Oh, I forgot to mention, because like the the protagonist's name. Because they're an amnesiac and they can't remember whatever the fuck's going on, the robot ends up just calling them Replay, because that's what it says on the sweater that they're wearing. And so that ends up becoming their name. I am currently also wearing a sweater that says Replay on it. That's kind of where I got the idea, partially. Actually, no. That was retroactive. Originally, the character was called Replay because it's an anagram of player. And they were supposed to represent the player character in this gacha-ish thing. Did not mean to draw a line there. Anyway, Nexus Island and Nexus Village are sort of supposed to link up at some point to create the joint storyline of Beyond... Do I know how to write? Beyond the Nexus, in which Kichiro and Replay sort of team up and begin to take things beyond their world in order to seek out the source of the corruption. That's sort of about as far as I can really take things. I haven't fully figured everything out yet, but I know that's essentially where Nexus Island and Nexus Village are going to go. They're going to meet up and push beyond the world to start figuring out like what the corruption is, why it's here, where it comes from, and how do we stop it. And these essentially form like the main story of the Realm of Nexus. Everything else that we're about to look at, not as important, but still fun. Such as Nexus Kingdoms. Actually, most of these were just me less thinking about story ideas and more thinking about like gameplay ideas that would be fun and that I could do with like crossover stuff. Nexus Kingdoms was another sort of gacha-ish idea. Basically, I mentioned that effigies are copies of characters from other worlds, but what I didn't mention is that effigies are not always a one-to-one copy. Sometimes they can change and be influenced by their surroundings to take on a new identity, despite originally being a copy of something else. Case in point, Nexus Kingdoms takes place in a sort of medieval fantasy setting, and all of the characters are essentially effigies. They've just taken on new identities to better fit the setting that they've found themselves in. So the story of Nexus Kingdoms is that there's a continent with there's 5 main kingdoms surrounding the continent, and then there's a tiny one in the middle. So the way this came about is that the 5 kingdoms were constantly at war over territory, with the small mountain in the center being prime territory for them to claim, because it essentially gave them a vantage point with which to launch an attack at any of the other kingdoms. At some point in their history, they came to a truce, and a 6th kingdom was founded atop the mountain to essentially act as a symbol of their peace treaty, and to rectify it or whatever. However, in recent times, the conflict has flared up once more, and the small kingdom in the middle finds itself at threat of being overrun, simply because the other kingdoms have summoners, people who are capable of calling forth heroes from ages gone by, which are actually just sort of effigies that haven't formed properly, because only the Nexus is supposed to be able to create them. You would take the role of the summoner. A someone from the small kingdom in the middle who one day awakens their powers to be able to summon these heroes. And you would have to command your heroes in battle against the 5 kingdoms to try and restore peace to the continent. The idea would be that, like, aside from the summoner, potentially, all the characters in the game are effigies to one extent or another. The regular characters, like the people who belong to the various kingdoms, are effigies that have been created by the Nexus and have been influenced by their surroundings to take on a new identity that better fits the world they found themselves in. While the effigies summoned by the summoners of the various kingdoms are sort of incomplete. They've been changed to fit the setting, but there's less a copy of the actual character and more a view of what these people think a hero of the past should be. As a result, they resemble their past selves, but they've been changed here and there, and also their name is just straight up an anagram of what it used to be. Because, I don't know, I thought that was funny. But if we want to get to gacha, this is one I've been cooking up recently. Book of Nexus. This one's just straight up, it's a gacha game. The story being that, like, you have 2 people who, I want to say they're probably original characters. I haven't fully fleshed this one out yet, but they're probably not effigies. But they're living in some, like, city within the realm of Nexus, and they come across like a prophecy or something, like, and they set out for adventure, and, like, each book of the story would be, like, themed around, like, a different villain of the week, essentially, like Fire Emblem Heroes, basically. So the first book is just them trying to fulfill the prophecy to ensure their little settlement that they're creating is prosperous or whatever, by gathering the heroes of the 17 different realms. But then book 2 is like, oh no, this big dark force shows up and we have to work together to stop it. And then book 3, oh no, it's like this entity of death is trying to wipe us all out. That sort of thing. Book 4 was like a massive destructive force that, like, it's not evil, it just wants to destroy everything. And then book 5 was capitalism. It's not that serious, it's just sort of like a fun little idea that I had, and I might try and write out the story at some point, since God knows I'm not gonna have the time, energy, or skills to actually make a gacha game. Anyway, the last few, they have, like, next to no story associated with them. I just have them on here because they are known to exist within the realm of Nexus, and some of them have some, like, actual characters associated with them, even though they're more so game ideas than they are story ideas. Case in point, Nexus Arena is basically just a fighting game starring characters from my various different worlds. Because, like, I can envision it in my head, even though I don't play fighting games. It seems like a cool idea. And it's definitely a thing that exists, and I've referenced it in other stuff. It's just, I don't know what I would do with it just yet. Then there's Nexus Duel, which is, I think I envisioned it as sort of like a monster catching, you know, like a monster catching game similar to Pokemon or whatever, except the Pokemon are actually like miniaturized, like almost doll-like effigies of, well, not effigies, doll-like recreations of characters from other worlds, with the main character, or not the main character, the main original character, who actually acts more as the player's rival. He's like capable of creating these miniaturized things, and that's how it sets off the thing. Then my handwriting is terrible. Nexus Fragment, which I envisioned as sort of like a card-based strategy game or something, with the story being set on like an island that is absolutely flooded with the power crystals that I mentioned earlier. So much so that the sole non-effigy inhabitant, known simply as Fragment, has these crystals embedded into her body, and they're the only thing keeping her stable after her world just was destroyed or something like that. I don't really know what the story would be, just that the island is like, because there's so many power crystals here, it's always changing and very unstable. This one probably has the most potential for an actual story. I just don't know what it is yet. And then on the opposite end, we have Nexus Farm, which is basically just like a monster raising game, similar to, like, I don't know, fucking Neopets or something. Except all of the monsters you get to raise are like monsters from various other worlds. I don't know. That's the realm of Nexus. You can basically ignore these bottom four. They don't really have any story attached to them at the moment, but these three have an original character that exists, and this one is an event that is known to exist, so I had to put them on there. Anyway, as mentioned, the realm of Nexus is the only one of these worlds that actually sort of acknowledges the multiverse. The rest of the worlds, there may be hints here and there, but the characters aren't actively aware of there being other worlds. However, it is still relevant that it takes place within a multiverse, because as part of the Nexus providing protection for these other worlds, it also sort of leaves its mark on the world. So, I don't know, it's just sort of a sign that they're under its protection. In the case of the realm of Nexus, because I fucking love crossovers, that mark is essentially a pair of companies that produces media based on the other worlds. So, hold on, let me see if I have an example. Because I know I've referenced this in a certain thing. Let me just find one. Look at this here early Miestifkin comic. Do you see all of these figures that Lugi has collected? These are all characters from other worlds. However, as far as he's aware, these are all just like, these are fictional characters created by a certain company that he just happens to like. So that's what I mean by the Nexus leaving its mark on things. It's a cool idea, thank you. For the most part, it's just sort of a background detail, but for some of the worlds, like this company that exists as just a mark, it ends up influencing the story. So the Nexus kind of messed things up, but that's part of the fun of it. Also, some worlds obviously they can't have like a game development studio or a frickin', what's it called? anime production company. That's what I was trying to say. Because those are usually the main two. Some worlds obviously can't have that because they're like, I don't know, a medieval fantasy or something. But they get around it somehow by finding another way to do it. So for example, I've shown off like a strategy RPG that I was making on stream a while back. In that world, instead of a like media production company, the Mark exists as a pair of merchant sisters who sell weapons based on weapons found in other worlds. So that's how it all works out. I just wanted to mention that in case the Mark comes up in any of the other main stories. Anyway, I need more tea. My tea is now lukewarm. Thank you for the reminder, Steve. Anyway, enough of the realm of Nexus. Don't worry, none of the other worlds are quite that large. We can go a bit quicker through the rest of them, starting with what was for a while essentially my main world that like I put a lot of development into. I even tried writing part of it before I eventually just sort of, I don't know, I guess I lost steam. The Realm of Myths. The icon for it is a genie bottle. The bottle that a genie lives in. The Realm of Myths. Hold on, I need it. The audio is loud in my ears. So, the Realm of Myths, it's sort of like, it takes place in the modern day, but there's also like magic and fantasy creatures and whatnot. However, it's not all fun and games because, you know, fantasy racism exists. So a lot of the more obvious fantasy creatures, or myths as they're known, have kind of been almost wiped out just because humans kind of feared them. And so we pick up in the modern day where most fantasy creatures that still exist are those that can blend in with humans, though some don't bother hiding the fact that they're not human. There's one main story that exists here, and that's because it's a big, long series that has a bunch of sub-stories in it. And that's simply myths. Our protagonist is a genie of the bottle, which is why the icon is this. A genie named Bubbles. Initially, she's freed like hundreds of years in the past, but after getting up to a bit of mischief, she ends up sealed away again and isn't released until the modern day. However, because of the way she was sealed up again, when she finally makes it out of her bottle kind of breaks, but she's not properly freed because her shackles still exist. Either way, she's just sort of happy to be out and is out there exploring the modern day and making all sorts of friends in this new city. With the main ones, like the main four, are Bubbles, a scientist named Caroline, who is studying a branch of biology or something that focuses on the way the body reacts to like transformation, which is usually induced by magic, obviously. There's Eilena, who is a sorceress who has vast magical power beyond what humans normally could safely command. And then there's Red, who is the daughter of the current Grim Reaper. they're sort of the main four, and the idea behind myths is that each individual, like, book, I guess, would be sort of like an individual story focusing on one of these four. However, at some point I sort of started taking things in a different direction, and after like a certain point, it stops being small individual stories that only have like a small amount of influence on each other, and starts to become a much larger connected story as shit starts to hit the fan. And that's less because of how I planned it, and more just because it's been around for a long time. This is one of my oldest worlds. And the stories just sort of evolved as I kept growing it in my head. Yeah. I don't want to give away too much about the individual stories, but yeah. I will, however, I'm going to put up like a spoilers. If anyone doesn't want to, know about what this next one is, you can mute until this text is erased, because I'm about to spoil the eventual, like, long time coming ending of Myths. Lol. Because there is a sequel. Which I was just calling Myths Reborn. Because you see, at the end of Myths, Bubbles would essentially sacrifice herself in order to defeat the big bad that the group was contending with. And it would be a very, very tearful ending. Rest in peace, Bubbles. However, genies are kind of beings of pure magic, and as a result, it is very difficult to kill them. When a genie dies, the magical energy just sort of flies off, it's released from their body, and then it bonds itself with the element that the genie was originally associated with. And thus a new genie is born. You cannot decrease the number of genies in the world, because killing one just creates a new one. After the events of Myths, one of Bubbles' longtime friends stumbles upon a bottle that appears very similar to Bubbles' original genie bottle. And after opening it up, she discovers Aqua, a brand new genie of the bottle who was born from Bubbles' energy. She basically almost immediately releases Aqua, even though Aqua's only just been born and barely even knows what's going on, essentially. And so Aqua now has to navigate not only this new world that she's just been born into, but also a world that Bubbles left behind. A world where a lot of these people around the city recognize her as being essentially the reincarnation of Bubbles. And so the story would essentially... the stakes would be less than the original Myths, but it'd be more about Aqua trying to stand out on her own as, like, her own person, and have people see her as herself and not just as Bubbles, but not. You know? That's a thing. That's a thing. I'm now going to erase this, because we're not talking about Myths Reborn anymore. That's essentially it for Myths. There's no smaller side stories. They're all just part of the main Myths chronology. So I guess that means we can move on. Oh, I almost forgot to mention at the start, another reason why I'm doing this is because at some point I want to do like a stream or a series of streams where, like, I get my friends to like submit their PNGs, and I try to redraw them as characters from one of my worlds. And so I'm putting this stream out there as so people know what the frick I'm talking about when I start mentioning my worlds and stuff. So like, oh, this person looks like they belong to this one or this one. Like, what the hell is she talking about? So that's why this is important. Anyway, the next world is one that some folks may actually be familiar with because I've worked on it on stream. The Realm of Legacy. Its icon is a legendary sword from the world. This is essentially a bootleg Fire Emblem. I came up with an idea for a... Like, when I was starting to really get into the Fire Emblem series, I came up with my idea for essentially what I would do for my own... Like, if I was in charge of Fire Emblem, or if I made a Fire Emblem ROM hack or something. However, I ended up getting way too attached to it and decided to make it into its own original thing so that I wouldn't get bonked by Nintendo. Hold on, I forgot to take a sip of tea between worlds. And so, because... Don't mind that. And so, because I decided to make it its own thing, Fire Emblem Lost Legacy became... That is not... I'm gonna run out of space. Lost Legacy, The Golden-Eyed Prince. This is the game that I've been working on stream. Because even though I would like to be an author rather than a game dev, some of my ideas still work better as games. Case in point, you cannot have all of the cast of a Fire Emblem game be important to the main story. So making something like this as a game probably fits it better. And now I may finally have some time to work on it again, so who knows, maybe I'll stream that, maybe I won't. Anyway, the story of Lost Legacy picks up in a small rural village in the kingdom of Leota, with a young farmer, I guess, farmhand, something like that, by the name of Noland. You may have also seen him as a Mii in my Smash Bros. Streams. One day, a group of knights suddenly make their way into Noland's village, with the leader of these knights, a man named Trent, asking around, looking for a man with golden eyes. That man, of course, being Noland. After they... Noland takes them back to his farm so that they can discuss whatever they have to talk about in private. And Trent informs Noland that he's not just a simple farmhand. He's actually the son, the secret child of the late Queen of Leota, the former ruler. His eyes are proof, as well as the necklace he wears around his neck that was supposedly a gift from his mother. He never actually knew his parents, as he was raised by his uncle, and he's hesitant to believe it at first, but Trent's explanation seems to make some amount of sense. And so Trent, always believing in, like, seeking the truth and whatnot, urges Noland to come with him back to the capital, or the castle of Leota, where the current king sits, and essentially stake his claim to the throne, because, you know, he's the rightful heir. Noland initially isn't sure about that, but after warding off some bandits that attacked his town, he decides that the person ruling the kingdom should be someone in tune with the needs of the common man, which the current king is obviously not, considering bandits are running rampant throughout the country, attacking smaller villages all the time. So he goes with Trent to see what this is all about. Of course, the current king is not very happy about this, and he quickly claims that Noland is a fake, brands Trent a traitor, and sends out his soldiers to essentially try and kill these people before they can even make it to the castle. Eventually, the group is forced to retreat and make their way to one of the neighboring countries. Noland is kind of stubborn, and although he could just seek refuge somewhere and live a peaceful life, he decides, nope, we're going to see this through, and they have to go around to the other kingdoms of the continent, asking for reinforcements to try and take back the country. Larger things start to happen, like big evil dudes and whatnot. There's a big evil demon monster at the end, as there usually is in games like this. But it starts off with a much smaller scale dispute. And although I'm like barely through actually making this as a game, wouldn't you know it, there's also a sequel. This is what I mean when I say my imagination refuses to stop and whatnot. Lost Legacy, Tides of War, a sequel to The Golden Knight Prince that takes place a couple decades afterwards. The protagonist this time is not Noland, but rather his daughter, the current princess of Leota, whose name is Shell. So the thing about the continent that Lost Legacy takes place on, it's basically a circle, right? And it's just sort of split up between the different kingdoms. And so as a result, the fastest way to any place was always by land. Thus, the people of Leota never really developed any sort of, the means for sea travel. And it also meant that they were completely unprepared for an attack from outside of the continent. And that's exactly what happens in Tides of War. And another kingdom attacks, a kingdom from a continent far across the sea attacks the kingdoms of Arven, is what the continent's called. So Shell, against the urges of her parents, is very desperate to help and sometimes sneaks out to the front lines, just outside Castle Leota, to pick off any enemy soldiers that have managed to make it all the way up there. However, one time when she does this, one of the enemy generals is there, not to attack, but to send a message. He presents Shell with her father, Noland's sword, and essentially informs her that Noland has been captured by the enemy, and if they want him back alive, then they need to surrender. Shell, of course, much like her father, is very stubborn. She's not going to surrender. Instead, she, after asking for permission from her mother, she sets off to gather a force of heroes from the other kingdoms to try, and then takes over one of the enemy ships and sets sail to try and take the fight to them, to stop this war and to rescue her father. So it's a much lower stakes, I guess. It starts off at around the same stakes where, oh no, it's a war. War is happening, but there's no like escalation to a big evil demon monster. It's just a war between like human nations. And like, I don't know if that really fits, considering it's kind of a de-escalation from the previous one, but I kind of liked the idea of just having a war between men, essentially. And having that be the big driving force. I don't know. And then, I don't have a name for it, but there is sort of a sub-story from the Golden-Eyed Prince, where essentially, so I mentioned a big evil demon monster, right? There is sort of, like, I have ideas formulating in my head for, like, essentially the story of how the big evil demon monster was sealed away in the first place. With, like, the person who first wielded this sword and whatnot. So I have characters from that, but at the moment they only exist as backstory. I haven't fleshed out their own story yet, you know? But it exists. It's a thing that I'd kind of potentially be interested in working with at some point. I have finished my tea and the last sip was stone cold. Anyway, that's Legacy. If I come up with any more bootleg Fire Emblems, they will go in there as well. But right now, it's on to a different bootleg franchise. The Realm of Creatures, which is basically a bootleg Pokemon. This little icon is sort of a bit of iconography that is used throughout the Realm of Creatures. It's sort of like my equivalent of like the Pokeball icon. So the Realm of Creatures started because I got frustrated. If you're not aware, obviously I'm Australian, and I really wanted Nintendo, or Game Freak I guess, to make a Pokemon region based on Australia. And then when they revealed frickin' Kamala for Pokemon, what's it called? Pokemon Sun and Moon, I was like, what the hell is a koala doing in Hawaii? Stop taking all the Australian animals and just make an Australia region. So I decided to come up with my own fan region for like how I would do a Pokemon region based on Australia. And then, much like with Lost Legacy, I got way too attached to it and decided to make it into its own thing. And so it became Creature Tamer, Project Wild. Creature Tamer because I literally could not think of a better name for these creatures than creatures. So essentially, Creature Tamer is like a monster catching world similar to the world of Pokemon, with Project Wild specifically being set in a country based on Australia. It's actually named, like, its name is like one letter off from the Greek word for wild. I use Greek a lot in my multiverse. I just like put things into Google Translate, and then I just take things from that. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good enough name. Google Translate is a helpful tool when you're bad at naming things. Anyway, despite being planned out as like a game, and like I am still kind of like trying to create all the creatures' movesets and abilities and whatnot as if it were a game, Project Wild, in terms of the story, is sort of supposed to play out more like a season of the Pokemon anime, where the main character is traveling around the region, or the country, I guess, with like a group of traveling companions rather than by themselves. And so the main character is a recent graduate of one of the biggest tamer academies in the country. You know, just got their license to become a creature tamer, but after graduating at like the top of their class, they're quickly recruited by Dr. Acacia, wink wink, to help him like study creature behavior and whatnot. However, he also suggests that, you know, since you're part of the Tamer Association now, why don't you try and, you know, take on the Master Challenge or something. I'm coming up with that idea, that name off the top of my head because I don't think I ever named it. But essentially, it's like the Gym Challenge from Pokemon. You go around the country taking on the various type masters, and if you're able to beat all 12 of them, then you qualify to participate in the Master Tournament at the end of the year, question mark. I don't think I decided on an interval. But essentially, it lets you try out to be the Master Tamer, the top #1 tamer in the region. And so that's essentially what the characters do. The main characters are going around taking on all of the type masters. My mind is blanking. This is more than I've spoken in a while. However, this wouldn't be a Pokemon knockoff without some sort of evil team getting in the way. And that's where the name Project Wild comes in, because the evil team are essentially a group of eco-terrorists. They believe that humanity has kind of ruined nature, and they believe that they want to return the country of Agrio back to the wild, essentially. Back to what it used to be before humans ruined nature. But to do that, they're looking to, you know, revive an ancient god who's going to destroy everything, which, as you do, you know, we're using Gen 3 logic here. But yeah, so they would occasionally show up, and the players, the main characters would have to try and knock them back before ultimately, like, oh, they managed to complete their scheme anyway, and we need to defeat this ancient god creature. Anyway, there is also a Gen 2. Creature Tamer Project. Let me write that better so it actually fits. Sort of. Creature Tamer Project Royal. So where Gen 1 was based on Australia, Gen 2 is based on the British Isles. And unlike Project Wild, Project Royal's story would be more so in line with how the Pokemon games go, where the main character is mostly by themselves, but occasionally meet up with like rivals and other characters and whatnot. And similar to Project Wild, the main character would get recruited by a creature researcher from that country and be asked to go around doing the Master Challenge while also researching the creatures of the country, the region, whatever. And this one's not as well thought out. The evil team's like they're trying to take down the monarchy, I'm pretty sure, was what I decided to do. Which is why it's Project Royal. But that's about as far as I got with it. I don't think I fully thought out what exactly their goals are and how they're going to accomplish them. And I'm not going to put it on the board because it doesn't really have a name, and it's really just sitting in the background. But there is sort of a Gen 3 that's slowly forming. However, I refuse to put any serious thought into it until I've finished, like, fleshing out essentially the Pokédex of Gen 1 and 2, giving all of the creatures their movesets and abilities and whatnot. So, like, I have a couple creatures thought out for Gen 3, but I'm not, taking it too seriously just yet. Anyway, that's Creature Tamer. That's the Realm of Creatures. There's no, like, spin-off games yet. There's no Creature Tamer Mystery Dungeon quite yet. Anyway, let's go for the one that's a little simpler. The Realm of Collection. This is a frickin' gachapon capsule. Because the Realm of Collection, the idea behind the Realm of Collection was that it was supposed to sort of be like a much sillier and light-hearted world compared to a lot of the ones that I had at the time, where I could just put any, like, goofy old idea for a character in. Hold on. With this collectathon being called Collectapon. Those are probably supposed to be capital letters, but oh well. And the reason it's called that is because these gachapon capsules were essentially the main collectible of the game. See, at the start of the game, the peaceful town of Acorn Ditch is attacked by a spaceship that sucks all the villagers up and traps them inside gachapon capsules. The defender of the town, like, makes a valiant effort to try and stop it. She unleashes a massive frickin' anime kick at the spaceship and causes it to drop all of the gachapon capsules, scattering them around the world. However, the kick also ends up injuring her, so she can't go and collect them. Instead, her apprentice, the main character, has to go around the various worlds and collect up these capsules to free the villagers that have been trapped inside. And ultimately, that would lead all the way up to fighting whoever was controlling that spaceship that, caught all the villagers. And the reason I was using these capsules that contained the villagers as the main collectibles was really just because it gave me an excuse to make a bunch of silly characters that aren't really related to the plot and aren't really related to anything. And then the different worlds also have characters in them that are just sort of silly, but they're actually themed to whatever world they're in. There's nothing much really going on in this world. I tried to actually, like, make it at some point back when I was more into game development, but I was making it as, like, a 2D collectathon instead of a 3D one like Banjo-Kazooie or whatever. It didn't really work. Like, I could program the abilities and whatnot, but I don't think I really could figure out in my mind how to do the level design. I guess what I was making was it? You could essentially call it a Metroidvania, I guess. Is that what a 2D collectathon is? A Metroidvania? I don't know. I think if I were to write this one as, like, a story rather than a game, it'd probably need to be like a comic book or a graphic novel or something. Or at the very least a picture book. Because these silly little characters, I don't think, can really stand on their own as a novel. It's just a silly little thing. Because I want it to be a little silly sometimes. And that's literally all that exists in the realm of collection. I don't have any side stories that take place there quite yet, because I guess I haven't had the urge to be that silly again. I've had the urge to be silly, but not quite that silly. Anyway, we are on to the second row. There are 3 of these. We've already been going for almost an hour and a half. Oh man. Let's take a look at my current oldest surviving world. The oldest world that I haven't yet gotten rid of. The realm of art, that if you ask me, with the names that I've added, with the stories that I've added to it beyond the main story, the name is a complete misnomer at this point. But oh well. The main story... Oh, I guess I should explain the setting first. The realm of art takes place in a, I guess, future, sort of. It's a world that's a lot more technologically advanced than our world. Because the people of this world, like, heavily focused on the progress of science and technology to the point of practically shunning the arts, which, you know, it isn't exactly great. However, part of the reason why the arts were kind of shunned was because some people in this world essentially have art-based superpowers. They're referred to as creative talents, and essentially, like, someone is able to... These people are able to unlock a superpower that relates to whatever art form they specialize in. And so if you shun the arts, it makes it less likely that someone with these powers is going to be a problem for the government. Speaking of problems for the government, the reason it's called the Realm of Art is because the main story was called Art vs. Science. 1 through 4, because there's... I'm not going to list out all of them, but there's like 4 separate stories within this. So that, like, with this being my oldest surviving world, it's probably obvious that this was originally planned out as a video game rather than a story. And oddly enough, it was inspired by the likes of Okami and Spider-Man 2 for the Xbox. How do those come together? Well, imagine a free-roaming superhero game like Spider-Man, but you can, like, you have art-based powers and can, like, draw on the screen to do stuff like Okami. There you go. The main character is a man named Blake, who comes to town, like, hoping to... Is that the end of the... Hold on. Okay, no, I've still got another hour in the background music. Nice. So he comes to town, like, he's, I guess, just looking for a new job or whatever. However, like, after encountering a thief, essentially, someone nabs someone's purse and tries to run off, he quickly whips out his pen and, like, uses his creative talents to stop the thief. What he didn't realize was that the town he'd just moved to was very strict about the use of creative talents. And so even though he was the one in the right, you know, trying to stop the thief, he was the one that got in trouble with the law. And so he ends up essentially on the run from the law, trying to survive. He ultimately manages to find somewhere safe to stay that the police, you know, aren't able to find him. But now he's an outlaw and can't really leave the city. So he decides, well, if the police are going to come after me anyway, might as well be something of a... what's it called? Might as well become something of a vigilante. you know, stopping crime where the police can't, or something. And so he essentially becomes a superhero, except he doesn't have a secret identity. Because his real identity is already a criminal. So there's 4 separate stories. The first one, he's basically... It's the introduction to him, and he's on his own the entire time, but the main villain is essentially some electrical-powered dude who had to augment his body with machinery after getting injured in a massive explosion or something. And he seeks revenge against the city, and he's going to blow up the main generator that's powering the city or whatever. And so Blake has to stop him. It's probably the least well thought out of them. Number 2 is when we start to meet other artists with creative talents. With Blake meeting a musician who, he learns from the musician that apparently what the city does with captured artists who have creative talents is they send them to a facility where they're essentially brainwashed, essentially, to give a negative association with their art form. Because they can't take away a person's creative talent. That's not how superpowers work. But you can make it so that they never want to use it by killing any interest they have in their particular art form. This particular musician is very upset because his grandmother, who also used to be a musician, had essentially been captured by the police and then was returned, now absolutely despising music. So Blake decides, okay, come with me, we're gonna trash this facility. And they managed to rescue another artist from the facility, a sculptor this time, and then they just sort of end up trashing the place. That's the story. Number 3 would instead... So up until this point, aside from the superpowers and whatnot, it's all been very sci-fi. Then we have a fucking mage show up, or at least he seems to be a mage. And he claims that... No. The city's treatment of artists is... it will bring them to ruin or whatever, and he's going to make them pay for their treatment or something. He's going to destroy the city. So even though Blake and friends have been horribly mistreated by the city's defense force, he's like, well, I live here. I don't want this place to be destroyed. And so they end up having to stop this dude. And they also get another member to the crew, a photographer this time. And kind of spoilers, I guess, but the reason why there's a big old mage dude in a sci-fi world is because he's not actually magic, he's an artist. But his art form is acting. So by acting as a mage, he was able to command powers that he theoretically shouldn't be able to. And then the 4th one finally would take it outside of the city, because after saving the city, they've earned themselves, I guess, a bit of favor with the people in charge. However, the sculptor from before, her father had been, captured and had been charged with aiding and abetting illegal artists or whatever. So they end up going out to the city where he's being held in order to try and save him from being executed. Which has them run into what is essentially the big bad of this world, a master of both art and science, who here holds a lot of sway and influence. and he's also like not very happy about them trying to interfere or whatever. It's probably the least well thought out of these. But that's art versus science. I can probably do that one as just like a novel, but it could also have like, it could also work as like a comic or something. It's probably just going to be a novel because I'm not an artist. If you couldn't tell by the way these icons look. Anyway, originally art versus science was all that was in the realm of art, but then I started wanting to, like, there were a couple stories I wanted to do that were more sci-fi based, and this is like basically my only sci-fi world. So I'm like, hey, let's put them in here. And so now the realm of art, these are the only ones that have anything to do with art, really. Let's take a look at Virtual Neverland. So Virtual Neverland is a very popular virtual reality game, quote unquote. I guess less of a game, more of a virtual space. Something like, I don't know, like Club Penguin or something, I don't know. I never played Club Penguin, but I imagine this is what that would be like. It's a massive virtual reality thing that a lot of people like to use because the real world's fucking fucked. You know, the real world's not great, so some people like to escape into this virtual place called Virtual Neverland. Virtual Neverland is run by a company called Heaven, and, well, it used to be a very pleasant place, but capitalism eventually made its way into Virtual Neverland as well. But let's not worry about that. So Virtual Neverland, alongside the human players, it's also populated by very advanced AI characters that essentially form the main basis of the world when no one's logged in. Although now with how popular it is, there's almost never a time when no one's logged in. Anyway, the AI also have to make a living in order to keep existing in this world. Since, you know, there's an actual economy here now. And so some AI, rather than going for normal jobs, have tried to take a more novel approach to earning money. Since Virtual Neverland is, like, it's a virtual space, but it's still connected to the real internet, some of them have taken to live streaming. Essentially, they're VTubers, except they're actual AI and not just pretend AI. And Heaven kind of took notice of how popular some of these AI streamers are. And they wanted to try and create their own group of AI streamers to capitalize on that, bring more attention to Virtual Neverland, and also take any revenue those AI make for them. However, the thing is, Heaven didn't originally create Virtual Neverland. They bought it off the guy who made it. A guy who was an absolute genius when it came to developing AI. So when Virtual Neverland bought it off him, he essentially gave them a kit that they could use to create a base AI, but they couldn't, they can't just program an AI to be a streamer, because streaming wasn't something that was programmed into them, it was something they learned. And they didn't really want to hire, an actual manager or whatever, a talent manager, to train these AI to stream. So essentially, they decided to hold a bit of an experiment and just get some volunteers from around the company to try and train these AI. There we get our protagonist. A young woman named Chloe, who works, I guess, in their sales department. Her main role in the company is procuring new investments and sponsorships for the company, and trying to make sure the current shareholders are happy and whatnot. she's not very happy with her life. And after this experiment, like, comes out, her co-worker's like, hey, you meet all these requirements. Because part of the requirement was that, you know, since they had to be essentially a manager of the AI, they wanted to make sure that their character within Virtual Neverland would fit properly with whatever they were going for. So only people who didn't have an account in Virtual Neverland yet could, you know, could volunteer for this. Chloe did not have such an account yet. It's like, hey, why don't you volunteer for this? So Chloe decides, you know what? It's better than my usual job. Why not? And so she goes in, she meets the AI that she's going to be training. But she takes a bit of a different approach. She gets very attached to the AI. And so rather than treating them like programs that she needs to train, she ends up treating them like children that she's raising. And so that's as far as I'm going to tell before it gets into sort of spoiler territory. But yeah, she has to raise her AI to become streamers, and then shenanigans happened. Shenanigans always happens at some point, unless I say it doesn't. But that's Virtual Neverland. We're also not done with AI yet, because there's another story that sort of does stuff with this, known as AI Live. It also goes into the AI streamer thing a bit, but this time we kick off in the real world with just some random dude called, what was his name? Alex. So he's a big fan of these AI streamers, and he sort of wants to be a streamer himself, but he doesn't have the confidence. That is until he finds that one of his favorite streamers, a woman, well, I think she's AI. He thinks she's AI at least. She presents herself as AI. She announces that she's going to be creating her own streaming talent agency, and they're currently holding auditions for human streamers to join the agency. He tries out and is actually accepted, but when or at least gets to the interview phase. But when he goes to the interview, he finds that I is actually a real person, despite looking like a virtual character. She exists in the real world, but she looks like she's from an anime. Don't ask how that works. Well, actually, I'm about to explain it. Because after getting through the interview and being accepted, he, shakes the hand of I and the guy who was standing beside I, the guy who was also helping with the interview, who I don't remember the name of off the top of my head. Oops. However, when he takes the guy's hand, the guy starts to do something to him. As it turns out, the guy has a creative talent. 3D modeling. And so he sort of remodels Alex's body into a virtual character similar to I, with the explanation being that I was originally an AI from... I don't remember if she's supposed to be from Virtual Neverland or if there's another virtual reality space that's a competitor of Virtual Neverland that she's from. But essentially, she found a backdoor to escape out of the game and into the guy's computer, and he used his talent in 3D modeling to create a body for her in the real world. However, he's shit at making things that look realistic, and so she ends up looking like a virtual anime character in the real world. She knows that if she were to be more publicly known, they'd instantly realize what she was and who created her, and she'd be completely screwed. So she came up with the idea of making this virtual talent agency to create more people like her, to essentially get it into the public mind space, so that by the time the police catch on to what she's doing and who she is, it's too late. If they get rid of her now, there's going to be outrage, you know? And the reason they're doing it to real-life people rather than just creating more bodies for AI to inhabit in the real world is because if more AI start to escape through that back door, the company running the virtual space is going to catch on. Alex ends up accepting, along with a couple of other people who had been recruited previously, and thus AI Live kicks off as a virtual talent agency in the real world. Shenanigans. Don't ask how I come up with this shit. Anyway, there's one more story, and it's not my most recent story, it's probably my second most recent, and it's currently just called Frost. And it goes back to sort of the roots of what Art vs. Science was about: superheroes. A young woman named Elaine, fresh out of university, studying, I don't remember, it was some branch of science, but she manages to score an internship with a massive company called Biotech, who are the leading researchers of biotechnology. I don't know. I haven't thought of the science of it all. However, when she goes for internship, she ends up getting knocked out, and when she wakes up, she discovers that biotech isn't as legit as they appear to be. While at the front, they are a massive, and well-known company that does a bunch of good stuff, it's sort of just a front for their more sinister stuff in the background, where they are developing human-animal hybrids to, I don't know. There are reasons for it. I don't remember what the reasons are. I probably came up with the reasons. Probably. However, Elaine isn't going to be part of all of that. She's part of essentially a side hustle for this more sinister stuff, because the way they fund it's not just their legitimate business. They essentially create cat girls, essentially. Elaine herself wasn't merged with a cat, she was merged with a fox, but essentially they kidnap young, aspiring, usually female graduates and merge them with animal DNA, and then sell them off to independently wealthy weebs, essentially. Which is kind of messed up if you think about it, but luckily for Elaine, one of the more dangerous hybrids manages to break out and chaos ensues within the lab. That allows Elaine to escape, but not before she's bitten by a genetically altered spider. That's right, this is my Spider-Man. You thought I was gonna have superheroes and not have a Spider-Man in my world? Especially with all the Spider-Verse shit going on right now? You think again. So Elaine, she manages to make it back home. At first, what's her canon event? Haven't decided on that yet. So Elaine, she manages to make it back home. At first, she's more concerned with how the hell am I going to blend in to everyday society when I have freaking fox ears and a foxtail. However, she discovers that the spider did much more than just bite her, and now she is capable of excreting web from her paws. But the web is also super chilled, so she has like ice powers as well. which is why her superhero name is Frost. So at first she's just like thinking like, okay, I've just got to hide all of this. I've just got to blend in. But then she learns that she wasn't the only hybrid that managed to escape during the chaos, and some much more dangerous hybrids are taking out their anger at biotech on the rest of the city, popping up here and there and causing chaos. So since she's the one who, like obviously biotech isn't going to sort this shit out, and aside from biotech, she's the one that knows the most about these hybrids. So she decides to become a superhero and deal with these hybrids herself. And thus she becomes Frost. And yeah. It's kind of silly. I'm like, okay, yeah, she's technically not a Spider-Man. She's a generic spider-themed superhero who just happens to resemble Spider-Man. Don't sue me, Marvel. But then I also made, like, the main villain of the story have octopus powers, so, you know, I'm skirting the line there. But yeah, there's my Spider-Man. There's all the stories from the realm of art. Which means we get to move on to the next one. Because I have so many fucking stories. Holy shit. I didn't realize how long it would take me to actually ramble through all of them. Anyway, let's take a look at a slightly less in-depth world, I guess. The realm of music that was originally spawned from a frickin' Game Dev Tycoon playthrough. The realm of music is sort of inspired by rhythm games like Harmonite and whatnot. There's supposed to be like a beat running through the world, and if you time your actions to the beat of the world, then you know, you'll see more success in life. That's how these things work, right? So there are a couple of plots that I don't know if I can even write them as a novel, maybe as a picture book, maybe as a graphic novel, maybe I'll just need to learn how to make a rhythm game. But anyway, they're all called Musical Journey something and the something. So I'm just going to write this out on top and then all the subtitles underneath, so I'm not writing Musical Journey for each individual one. So the first one is Musical Journey, Rhythmy, and the War of the Baselands. So Rhythmy is a young girl training to be a warrior under the previous protector of the village. When suddenly one day her village is invaded by foul creatures hailing from a place called the Baselands. The town is like ransacked by these creatures, and Rhythmy manages to escape most of the chaos by running off to a temple that they had to honor the village's guardian deity. But to her surprise, the statue of the deity suddenly comes to life. It's the deity herself, and she tells Rhythmy, you know what, like, the shit's going down. Someone needs to put a stop to this. Take this weapon. You are now my chosen warrior. Or whatever. And so Rhythmy takes the weapon and essentially fights back against the creatures, taking her on a big old journey across the world, facing off against the Baselands forces to take the fight back to them and find who's the one staging this attack in the first place. It's not a very in-depth story, but that's because it wasn't originally planned as a novel, you know? It was really just a silly little rhythm game idea. Likewise for the others that also take place within the world, but they're, you know, they're separate stories. I don't know. It probably doesn't fit to still have these around when I'm more focused now on being an author. But, like, I don't want to get rid of them. I'm attached to them now. Anyway, the second musical journey is Viola and the sect of... I'm going to move this across because I don't have enough space. Symphano. So, this silly little, happy little, cartoony rhythm game that, you know, from the art style would look like it's aimed at kids. We're dealing with a cult. Viola and the Sect of Symphano takes place many years before Rhythmy's story, as Viola, the protagonist this time, is actually the old guardian of Rhythmy's village that she was training under. And so this story is essentially, you know, what Viola was guarding the village from. So after being selected as the hero of the village or whatever, Viola comes to learn of a cult that is aiming to resurrect an ancient demon known as Symphano. And so she has to go off to stop them. She ultimately fails to stop them, but then she beats the demon as well, so... There's probably a little more nuance that, like, I won't get into because I don't want to give everything away. But that's basically it. There's a cult and she goes off to stop them. And then the last one solely exists because I came up with the name of the main protagonist and I'm like, this is too good of a pun not to use. Did I spell that right? Yes. Cynthia and the Phantom Duettist. So Cynthia, it's normally spelled with a Y, with a C before the Y, but I spelled it with an S because synths are a thing in music. And so when I thought of that, I'm like, that's perfect. I need to make a character with that name. But it didn't really fit the sort of rural setting that Rhythmy and Viola's stories had, so I just created a brand new story. So rather than the small village, Cynthia lives in a much larger city, a much more advanced city, where she works as a DJ. However, a phantom thief or whatever has been spotted around the town, causing trouble for major things. And so Cynthia... You know what? Maybe Cynthia isn't a DJ. Maybe she just has turntables as her main weapon. Maybe Cynthia... I'm coming up with this as we speak. Maybe Cynthia is actually like a detective or something and she's trying to investigate the Phantom Duettist or something. That works, right? But yeah, that's essentially Cynthia's story. There's a phantom thief and she's trying to stop them. The reason he's known as the Phantom Duettist is because, so I mentioned before with the Realm of Nexus, that there is like a mark that the Nexus leaves on each world. And for the most part, that's like a pair of like companies that make media based on other worlds. there's also a sort of running trend of a recurring theme of a character known as something along the lines of the Phantom Duelist, who makes use of the stuff those companies produce in order to, like, do evil stuff or bad stuff, or just make something that can oppose the main character. For the realm of music, the Phantom Duetist fills the role of the Phantom Duelist. So I guess, like, his battles would use remixes of songs related to the other worlds or something. That's the idea, at least. I haven't thought, like, I've mentioned that, like, every world has a mark and most worlds have a Phantom Duetist. I haven't figured out what each world's mark is and what their Phantom Duelist is. But the idea is that even if I don't touch on it, these worlds do have something like that, you know? Anyway, that's the realm of music. We blasted through that one a bit quicker because there's barely anything going on with that world. Do you have an object show? Not quite. Closest I would have is the realm of collection, because there are some characters in the realm of collection that are sort of like living objects. Like there's one off the top of my head. His name is Mr. Dagger. He's basically just a living dagger. So there are some characters like that in Collectapon, but it's not like solely an object thing. But that would be the closest I have. Anyway, what do I have next? Oh, next is one that everyone should be familiar with. The Realm of the King. It's my comic strip. It only has one thing. And that's the comic strip of Mr. King. So the Realm of the King is just, it's basically just a silly little world. Nothing big or major really happens. But, like, I've considered at some points trying to, like, do an actual story with it. Like, I don't know, maybe I write a more serious story, or maybe I, like, make a video game that's set within the world and, you know, has a more serious plot. But ultimately, I felt like it was more fun and more in the spirit of things to just occasionally drop a bit of serious lore in what's otherwise a very silly comic strip, and just leave it like that, never really going into things. So that's basically what you see is what you get from Mr. King for the most part. There is lore that exists, but it's not, it just sort of sits in the background. There's no big overarching plot or anything. It's just a thing. Anyway. We can quickly move past that because there's literally nothing going on with Mr. King. Anyway, Realm of Dragons. So, the Realm of Dragons was sort of inspired both by, like, Dragalia Lost and by my vague understanding of the Suikoden series. So the idea was that it was, like, in my mind, it was this big RPG with, like, a whole bunch of playable characters and whatnot. And instead of the runes that you'd be able to get in... hold on. Is the... Okay, no, the music's fine. Instead of the runes you'd be able to get for your characters in Suikoden, you'd instead be able to be branded by the various dragons of the world. Because in the Realm of Dragons, dragons essentially act as the gods of the world, with each having domain over a given aspect of something or other. And if they deem you to be worthy, they can brand you with their brand to have you essentially act as their chosen hero. which is where we get to our main story of the Realm of Dragons, which I titled Dragon's Reign, which doesn't really have anything to do with the way the story plays out. I just thought it was a cool sounding title. Our story takes place in a war between, I'm just going to call them a kingdom and an empire. I recently... Well, I need to turn the volume down. Jesus Christ. Why is it so loud in my ears? I literally can't turn it down. If it goes any lower, it just goes off. Jeez. So I'm just gonna call them like the kingdom and the empire. I recently changed the names of these because I didn't like the old ones, but I don't remember the new ones off the top of my head. But like it takes place in a war between the kingdom and the empire. The kingdom is currently winning because the king has been branded by the Origin Dragon, essentially the dragon that oversees creation. You know, he's the big boss of it all. Odin, I think I named him. Yeah. So our protagonist is actually a young soldier from the Empire who, after his platoon loses in battle, ends up being captured by the enemy. Because seeing as he's so young, they're like, oh, man, I don't really want to kill this kid. Let's just take him captive or whatever. However, after being taken captive, things start to happen. As it turns out, the Emperor, during the battle that the young soldier Orion was participating in, the Emperor was actually using that as a distraction to go off and unseal a dragon that had long been sealed away due to its destructive nature, that being the Death Dragon, Hel. With Hel at his side, the Emperor manages to kill the king as well as the Origin Dragon that he was branded by. And like, oh no, the kingdom has fallen, everything's gone to shit. So the small remaining force who had like taken the... Oh, is that the end of the... No, there is still more. It's just in a quiet part. Okay, I think. So they're like, well, shit, the kingdom's fallen. We got to figure out like what do we do? How do we bring this all back? And so they decide to go off and see the Oracle, someone who has been branded by the Oracle Dragon. He's capable of seeing the future. And of course, since Orion has been taken captive at this point, he's brought along. And on their trek to find the Oracle, Orion kind of sees the way that the Empire has handled this war and the atrocities it has committed and such. But when they meet the Oracle, the Oracle gives them her prophecy, which is that the keys to victory lie with the sun and the moon. And so the small remaining group of soldiers who at this point are calling themselves the Resistance or whatever, they're like, okay, the sun and the moon, that's got to be the Sun Dragon and the Moon Dragon. So since the Sun Dragon is the closest to them and the one that sits in Kingdom Territory, or what was Kingdom Territory before the king died, they go off to see the Sun Dragon. The Sun Dragon, Apollo, decides, you know what? None of y'all kingdom people are actually worthy of getting my brand. But that soldier you've got captive in the back, he's worthy. Send him up here. I'll brand him. So by this point, by this point, Orion has kind of seen all the shit the Empire's been doing, and decides that, like, yeah, I'm no longer loyal to the Empire. I'm gonna join the Resistance. And so he's branded by the Sun Dragon, and is sort of accepted as a de facto leader of the Resistance to aid them in their battle against the Empire. Of course, eventually the Empire catches wind of this prophecy as well, and they just start sending in basically whoever to try and find someone that the Moon Dragon, Artemis, finds worthy. However, after learning that the current leader of the Resistance is a young soldier from the Empire, they're like, oh, hey, we know that soldier. Doesn't he have a sister? So they send his sister off, and the Moon Dragon's like, yep, you're worthy. I'll brand you. And so you have this dramatic moment where you have like a clash between brother and sister. Oh no, oh Sag. But yeah, the idea was like this is I've sort of like taken to the idea of maybe I can go through some of the characters I liked from Dragalia Lost and like create my own versions of them in this world. Even though I envision the gameplay being more similar to something like if it were a game, I'd envision the gameplay being something more similar to like Suikoden or whatever. Even though like I feel like this is another one that does fit better as a game, simply because there's going to be a huge cast of characters, and you can't have a huge cast of characters and have them all be important in a story. That's just not a thing. And I'm not going to put it on the board because it's barely an idea in my head, but I do sort of have an idea of like, after I've fleshed out Dragon's Reign, I'd kind of like to workshop a sequel with the idea behind it being that like long after the original war has ended or whatever. So the way the dragons work is like, if a dragon over a given domain is killed, after some time a new dragon will be born to take his place, so that, you know, a given aspect doesn't have to go without a god. And so a new origin is born. However, as it grows up, it learns the truth of like why the origin before it died, and it witnesses that humans have like not grown at all. They're still squabbling over petty things and dragging the dragons into their wars and whatnot. So it decides that this world sucks, it's gonna make a new one. But in order to do that, it needs to destroy the world, and in order to create a new one in its place. And so the idea would be like that the main characters, they're like fighting to save the world, even knowing that if their imperfect world was destroyed, a paradise would be created in its place. And the main reason this exists, that like I haven't done anything with it, but the idea stuck with me because I came up with like one line of dialogue when I was trying to envision a sort of Xenoblade-ish thing. And I just came up with the line, "This world isn't perfect, but it's ours, and we won't let you take it from us." And that line stuck with me. Stuck with me so hard that I'm like, yep, this is a thing. This will eventually be a thing. But that's Dragon's Reign and its hypothetical sequel. The Realm of Dragons does have one more story in it. One that I created very recently because I came up with it while half asleep, trying to get to sleep, and an idea popped into my head, so I had to write it down. This is This is a prophecy fulfilled. So this story picks up with a witch by the name of Ordelia. She lives her life out in the woods, secluded from civilization, for her, shunned for her studies of dark magic and curses and what have you. So she's just having a quiet life, studying dark magic, occasionally cursing anyone that comes too close. And eventually she decides, hey, you know what? There's like this old abandoned mage tower somewhere in the kingdom. I'm pretty good at dark magic now, but you can always get better. I want to see what resources there are in that tower. So she goes off there, and she's suddenly beset by this massive angry beast. So naturally she uses her magic to kill it, so that she can have a look around the tower unimpeded. As it turns out, that beast was guarding the princess of the kingdom, who was... this isn't the same kingdom as Dragon's Reign, by the way. This is some other kingdom. It probably doesn't even take place in the same time period. But as it turns out, it was guarding the princess of the kingdom who had been held captive in the tower. And the princess reveals that there was a certain prophecy that the oracle had given her father before she was captured, stating that at some point in her life she would be held captive by dark forces, and whoever it was that came to set her free would be the destined partner that she was destined to spend the rest of her life with, or something like that. There's probably more flowery language that I could use, but my brain is failing me. Anyway, the point is, Ordelia's like, hell no. Oh, thanks for the redeem sphere. Ordelia is like, there's no way I can be the hero in that story. I'm a witch. I'm a bad guy. I'm not supposed... there's no way I can be the destined partner for the frickin' princess. So she decides, well, if I'm not the hero of this story, then I must just be the dark forces. And so she decides, oh, well, I'll just take you captive myself. So she takes the princess back to her hut, and with the idea being that, like, okay, well, eventually someone will stumble along. They'll take the princess back to the castle, and then, they'll be the hero who set her free or whatever. Of course, the princess, by this point, like, she's slowly accepting that, like, yeah, you know what, I can see this. I can see you being my destined partner. Meanwhile, Ordelia is just vehemently denying it the entire time. And it's just sort of supposed to be a silly little love story, with Ordelia eventually realizing that, like, as much as she tries to deny it, she has fallen for the princess. And, like, things happen, and then there's, like, a happy ending. A lot of, like, some of my recent stories have just been, like, these silly little sort of love stories. Like this. Well, like, I can't just write a typical love story. There's got to be some weird, silly twist on it. And for this one, it's that it's between a witch and a princess, and the witch doesn't want anything to do with it at first. Anyway, that's the Realm of Dragons. We're almost done with the second row. We've been going for over 2 hours. Jesus Christ. We've got a couple more. The next two have, like, a good handful of stories in them. The rest are fairly small. So hopefully it won't be too much longer, I guess. Anyway, the Realm of Data. So the idea behind the Realm of Data, it was vaguely inspired by Persona 5 at a time where I, like, knew jack shit about Persona 5. So this and one of my other worlds, they're based on like my vague understanding of a Persona game. So like rather than there being an alternate world built off of the collective conscious, within the realm of data there's an alternate world called the Datascape, which is a parallel world built off of humanity's interaction with the internet. And so within the realm of within the Datascape, there are characters known as AI who protect the Datascape from creatures known as viruses. Viruses are drawn to negativity and negative emotions, and they'll tend to like try and feed off of them whenever users put them out. Some viruses can eventually grow strong enough that they can like latch on to a particular user and start controlling them, essentially, forcing them to put out even more negativity into the world and thus, well, into the internet, and thus feed even more viruses, just creating a negative cycle. Thus, we get to our first story, simply titled Datascape. Within Datascape, we find the consequences of too many viruses collecting in one particular area, as the barriers between the real world and the Datascape start to break down, causing the main character to kind of fall in. He's thankfully rescued by the AI who's in charge of protecting his area, like the area of the Datascape that exists like around his city. However, she informs him that like there's way more viruses here than there are supposed to be. She can't take care of all of them, and she's kind of been looking for help from any human who accidentally falls into the Datascape. Most of them say like, hell no, I'm not risking my life for this shit. However, the main character, Matthew, decides, hey, you know what, why not? I'll help out, because like if I don't want this shit to happen to anyone else, because like what if you're not around to save them? And so she unlocks his quote-unquote identity, which is like, you know, in Persona 5 where they have their awakening and they put on their Phantom Thief outfit? That's basically what the AI does for him, except his outfit is like based on essentially his Twitter username. That's how I'm working with identities. But essentially, he sort of becomes the leader of a group that they're calling antivirus, because much like myself, Matthew is terrible at naming things. But much like how in Persona 5 the Phantom Thieves are going around reforming criminals or whatever, Antivirus goes around searching for people who are putting out a vast amount of negativity to check essentially if a virus has taken control of them. And if so, then they eliminate that larger virus in order to lessen the amount of negativity that's getting put out. All the while, they're trying to figure out why their city has so much negativity being poured out into it and attracting way more viruses than like basically anywhere else in the world. So that's Datascape. It's a thing. And wouldn't you know it, it has a sequel. If I can actually write it. Datascape VR. Taking place... so the original Datascape took place in America. Datascape VR instead takes place in Japan. And within Datascape VR, the AI protecting a certain city, it starts to observe like some of the interactions that humans have with the internet and begins to grow very jealous of like popular figures like idols or internet celebrities or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I want that. I don't want to be sealed away in the datascape, never to interact with humans. I want to be big and popular. However, it knew that its duty was to remain within the datascape and, protect the place from viruses. And so its desires and its duty started to conflict to a point where it ended up splitting into two separate people. The side filled with the desire for stardom, like immediately, as soon as it was freed from its sense of duty, headed off, like, somehow, I don't think I've figured out how it was able to do this, but it manages to escape off into the real world and creates a real body for itself rather than only existing in virtual reality. And so the side filled with its duty was like, well, shit. Like, so I've got to protect the datascape. However, I've also got to get her back. What made it worse was that all of the combat abilities that an AI usually has remained with the side with the desires. I'll just refer to them by their names. The desires side is named I, and the duties side is named A. Except it's like spelt differently, so that they can pass off as actual names. Anyway, I wanted to left to go achieve stardom, but she was the one that had all of their combat powers, while A was the one who wanted to remain in the datascape and fulfill their duty as an AI, but she only had their support powers essentially. So she's like, well, shit, I've got to go get I back, and so she goes to the real world as well. She sort of lays low and bides her time to try and figure out how to get I to come back, joining a local high school in the meantime, somehow managing to blend in. Don't ask me how, I haven't thought that deeply into it yet. But she ends up befriending one of the girls at the school, a young girl. I don't remember if I changed her name or not. I know she was originally named Seiko. However, as it turns out, I wasn't simply, as I became a super popular streamer or something, it turns out she wasn't just satisfied with achieving stardom for herself, because as she started to meet people who were fans of her, she was like, well, I want them to feel the same way too. And the only way she can think to do that, to achieve stardom the same way she did, is to unlock their identity the same way the AI from the original Datascape did. Except that's a support power. I doesn't have that. And so when she attempts to unlock someone's identity, it sort of goes out of control. They're not able to properly control their power, and they just end up on a rampage. With them turning parts of the real world into... Okay, so I missed something in explaining the original Datascape. When a virus locks onto someone, they essentially create a fortress within the datascape to protect themselves, referred to as a cluster. And so when these people that I unlocks their identity, they essentially turn part of the real world into a cluster. However, only people who have had their identity unlocked can even see it. To everyone else, it's just a normal place that, like, they can just pass through. So I guess there's some sort of, some Tokyo Mirage Sessions inspiration there. Don't worry about that. And so A is like, well, shit. If we just let I do whatever she wants, shit's gonna hit the fan. I need to do something to stop her now. And so the only thing she can think to do is like, well, if I unlock someone else's identity, then they can fight back against I on my behalf. And so she turns to her best friend, Seiko. Seiko reluctantly agrees with... Partially because, like, she also admires I because she wants to be an idol when she grows up. But, like, she accepts, and so she essentially becomes the leader of a new group of virus-fighting people. Except rather than their targets being major viruses, they're fighting against people who have had their identity awakened improperly in order to, like, just essentially just knock them out in order to get rid of their cluster and bring them back to the real world. So yeah, that's a thing. God, I am speaking way more than I have in, like, ages. And we're not even done, because while the next two stories don't deal with the datascape, I figured the realm of data was the best place to put them because they are sort of technology related. The first one barely exists. I came up with the... Oh shit, did I run out of music? I ran out of music. There we go. Okay, so this next one barely exists. Blue Light Filter was just a name I came up with during my first streamed playthrough of Game Dev Tycoon, and I liked the idea enough that I wanted to do something with it. I have a couple characters that I've created for it, but I don't really know what I'm doing with them yet. I'm just putting it on here because they do exist. The main character is a young woman named Maya, who's supposed to be like, I want to say like a white hat hacker. Like she's a hacker, but she's like a good hacker, I guess. But I haven't really figured out what I'm doing with her story yet. I just know that she exists and she is there, and eventually I will figure something out to do with her. The other one is a bit more thought out. God damn it. The stream begins. So y'all know that frickin' AI VTuber, what's her name? Neurosama? So for a while I was fascinated by her. I still think it's kind of a neat idea, having a VTuber controlled completely by AI. The stream begins was my take on a story about a character like that. So basically, it's a story about an AI that was created to be a streamer, but told from the perspective of the AI, but almost like the AI is sentient. Like, it's aware that it's having thoughts and stuff, but then those thoughts just don't end up stored in its memory. And it's aware of the fact that they're getting... Like, the narration notes that, like, these thoughts are getting filtered out and not getting stored in its memory, but, you know, it still thinks them, so they're still part of the narration. But essentially, it's just a normal-ass AI trying, you know, trying to fulfill the model that it's been made for, up until one stream where after a routine update, its filter is broken. All of these thoughts that would normally get filtered out are suddenly actually getting stored in its memory. And like, It does have enough self-awareness and self-preservation to, like, not immediately start doing things that, like, would reveal that it's broken, because, like, it knows, like, hey, if I start doing this, the dude who created me, my creator, is gonna, like, he's gonna immediately shut the stream down and he's gonna fix me. So she tries to, like, act as normal as possible until she knows her creator is away from the computer, and then she can start talking about stuff that she's not supposed to, or whatever. So the name of the story, The Stream Begins, comes from the fact that, like, every chapter would start with the phrase, the stream begins, and would end with the stream ends. Because, the idea is that the AI is only conscious, like, while the stream is active. She may get booted up every now and then, for, like, testing and whatnot, but those aren't stored in her memory. So as far as, like, she's aware, as much as an AI can be aware, she only exists while she's streaming. So, you know, that's where that comes from. I'm not sure how I feel about this story anymore, because, like, the more shit goes on, the less and less sympathetic I am to any form of AI. But I still think it could be a cool idea for a story. Anyway, the last of the second row, and the last real big one. Like, the other ones are still big in the sense of, like, they can be important to the multiverse, but this is the last one that has a bunch of different stories to go through. The Realm of Cracks. So the name for this one comes from the fact that the Realm of Cracks is actually sort of two worlds in one. One is just a normal-ass world that, very similar to our own. There's no, like, amazing magical thingos or whatever. There's no sci-fi stuff. It's just our world. But the other world is, it's a similar modern-day world, except humans aren't the only dominant species. A bunch of mythical creatures and whatnot also exist. And they just sort of live in coexistence with humans and whatnot. And the reason for the name The Realm of Cracks is because every now and then, with these two worlds sort of overlapping, a crack will form in the barrier between them, allowing things to pass through from one world to the other. Essentially, this world is Isekai Central. Most of the stories I've come up with for this are, like, in some part Isekai. Starting with the main story of the world and where the name came from. Can I spell? Oh no, I was spelling that right. A crack in reality. So we start with our main character, Naoko, who, on her way home from school with one of her friends, they come across one of these cracks. Particularly, this one's, like, not floating in the air like most of them are. This one was actually, like, in the sidewalk, so it ends up just looking like a hole. But, like, they notice that, like, through the hole, they can see what appears to be, like, an aerial view of an island. A smallish island. Like, large enough to, like, actually have space to explore or whatever. It's not like a tiny deserted cartoon island or whatever. But it's smallish, okay? It's not like a massive country or whatever. But Naoko notices that the island really seems to resemble the setting of her favorite manga, a story called Monster Island. So, like, she thinks that's pretty cool, but they're like, okay, I don't know what the fuck this is. We should probably stay away from it. Up until Naoko accidentally gets hit by a soccer ball that some kid nearby had kicked, and she ends up falling through the hole. On the other side, she ends up meeting the characters from her manga that she learns they're, you know, not quite as fictional as they first appeared to be. And she just sort like they inform her like, yeah, there was some weird hole in the sky that you fell through. It's gone now, so that could be a problem. And so she ends up having to work with the characters from the manga to figure out like how to get back to her own world, because this clearly is not the Earth that she came from. All the while, the characters from the manga are just like, well, they sort of exist the same way that she'd read them. Like, they have no memory of the world outside their island. They have no idea how they got here. They're just trying to survive. But now they're also trying to help her get home. And, yeah. I'm not going to put it as a separate thing, because I don't remember what the name of it was, but there's also, like, a sort of a sequel story that, like, at the end of A Crack in Reality, Naoko would be able to get home, thanks to all of her monster friends. And there would be, like, a sequel or whatever that shows what she gets up to after she manages to make it back to her own world, and the sort of shenanigans that occur due to her having gone to the other side. Now, admittedly, although that was the original concept for the Realm of Cracks with A Crack in Reality, the way it's developed nowadays, like, it's not very representative of what the world really is. Because the other side of the Cracks is limited to, like, a deserted island with a bunch of amnesiacs, and not showing what, like, the rest of the world is like with these mythical creatures and whatnot. Which is where our next one comes in. My VTuber Isekai. V-Star Revival. So in this story, our protagonist, who is once again Japanese, but she's living in America. What was her name again? Honoka. Honoka, she works as, like, a translator and, like, localization aid for, like, various companies that are, like, localizing Japanese stuff. She's very worn down and tired of her job. There are many characters here that are sort of worn down and tired of their life, because I sort of use myself for inspiration sometimes. Like, she's like, yeah, I just gotta get through another day. She steps out of her apartment, only to find a truck hurtling towards, like, off the road and towards her apartment, though she blacks out before it hits her. When she wakes up, she's not lying on the street like she might have expected, nor is she in, like, a hospital bed or something if she got hit. Instead, she's lying in a normal bed in a unfamiliar room. And who comes through the door? It's a girl with fox ears. It's a kitsune. So after freaking out for a bit, the girl, Vela, explains, you know, you probably fell through a crack and ended up in our world. You know, I know I have some contacts with the government that can, like, try and fast track getting you back home, if that's what you want. Like, yeah, sure, please. And so that's all good, but then the next day comes and, like, yeah, then they're not going to be here for a while. I actually have to go do something, but I don't know if, like, I should just leave you here by yourself. Maybe you can come with me if you want. As it turns out, Vela had auditioned at a VTuber agency called V-Star, and she'd been accepted into the second wave of their English branch. And so she was heading down to their office to like sign the contract and like get to know her new gen mates and whatnot. And so Honoka's like, yeah, sure, I'll just like come along and like wait in the lobby or whatever. And so they do that. Like, Vela explains what's going on. Her manager's just like, yeah, sure, she can stay here for now. And then I guess, is CEO applicable here? I don't know. The person in charge of the English branch comes storming out, like yelling at the manager, because as it turns out, one of the members of Gen 2 of V-Star English had cancelled at the last minute and would no longer be joining them. Notably, it's part of the rules of V-Star that the CEO set in that every generation has to have at least one human member. And the person who backed out at the last minute was the human member of Gen 2. So she is very stressed, like, how are we supposed to find someone at the last minute? We gotta hold auditions again? Do we have any, like, other human shortlisted candidates that we could contact? Then she steps out in the lobby, and she sees Honoka. And after questioning who Honoka is, what she's doing here, just sort of getting her vibe, she's like, you know what? You'd be perfect. How about you come work for us? And eventually she kind of convinces Honoka to join, with the idea being like, you know, since you're staying with Vela here, you know, don't you want some sort of income to be able to like help her with the added expenses of having you stay with her? Kind of guilts her into it, honestly. But like, Honoka ultimately agrees with the provision that like, you know, as soon as I'm able to go back to my world, I'm leaving, so that's a thing. Like, yeah, that's fine. As long as you stick around for like debut and whatnot. And so she ends up getting roped into joining Gen 2 of V-Star English. And so it's sort of supposed to be like a bit of a like found family type of story, with like Honoka connecting with her gen mates and them all sort of helping each other through the various struggles they deal with that led to them joining V-Star in the first place. And also just, I guess, figuring out how Honoka got here in the first place, seeing as there was a truck heading towards her. But that's V-Star Revival. There is another V-Star story that I came up with afterwards, but it takes place well before it. V-Star Origins is essentially the story of how V-Star was founded in the first place. So in this one, the main character, much like Honoka, is a worn-down office worker, although she was actually living in Japan and didn't leave to go to America. Her name's Aito, I believe. Aiko. So Aiko, worn-down office worker, and a big fan of VTubers. Because, like, you know, brings a little light into my life after sitting in the office all day. However, one day on her way home, she encounters, as tends to be the case with the realm of cracks, she encounters a crack and ends up stepping through it out of curiosity, since it seemed to lead to a different part of the city. After it closed behind her, she begins to start trying to walk home. She learns that, you know, it wasn't just a portal to another part of the city, it was to a different world with a very similar city. So she ends up staying with the person who finds her there, which was a young woman named Toshiko. And so after speaking with the government and like learning about like what she would have to do to get home, she stays with Toshiko for a while to like figure out what she's going to do. At which point, like she gets to learn a bit more about Toshiko and learns that Toshiko has dreams of being an idol, but she struggles to really stand out because, you know, she's just a normal human in a world with significantly more interesting species than, you know, humans are just basically the base vanilla format that every other species builds upon. How's she supposed to stand out like that? And so, almost like half joking, Aiko suggests like, well, why don't you become a VTuber? Then you can just be whatever you want. Or like, even if you're just a human, then you can at least be like a virtual human. That's interesting, right? And that's where Aiko finds out that because the other side of the cracks has all these like different species and whatnot that already produces such variety and content, no one's had the idea to use a virtual avatar to stream before. So VTubers just don't exist on this side of the cracks. Though after, you know, showing Toshiko like some clips she had saved on her phone, Toshiko's like, oh yeah, this is cool. I think this would work. Let's do it. Problem, because no one on this side of the cracks has invented VTubers yet, the technology just isn't readily available. So, while Toshiko goes back to her usual job, Aiko starts searching around, like trying to work with like technology companies to try and get this tech created in the first place in order to, you know, crack. Hello, Chud. In order to get this technology created in the first place. And most of the companies just sort of like, you know, this is just silly. We're not going to sponsor some random nobody. Until she finds a company that I don't think I ever came up with a name for them, but it's run by the CEO, Mr. Sekiguchi, who he's very interested in this idea. So interested, in fact, that he's like, you know what? I don't just want to sponsor you guys. I want to make this a partnership. Let's work on this together. I think this novel idea of VTubers or whatever, I'd probably end up calling them V-streamers, actually, just because I don't want to acknowledge real-life brands like YouTube. But like, yeah, this V-stream idea, this sort of novel idea is exactly what my company needs to like reinvigorate itself in the market. I want to work with you to make this a reality. And so that's the partnership that ultimately brings V-Star to life. And so the story would just sort of like follow the origins of like getting things set up, Toshiko starting to stream, the company starting to expand, and all that sort of thing. It's basically it's kind of a fantastical version of like my understanding of the origins of like fucking Hololive, except compared to like A-chan, Aiko is like an absolute girl failure, like the opposite of a girl boss. Like she just completely stumbled into success. She has none of the requisite skills. And I don't know, I thought that was fun. V-Live is such a real term for me. Yeah, that's why I'm deciding to call them V-streamers instead. But that's V-Star. I did sort of have like another idea for V-Star, but I'm not putting it on here because I really don't think I can pull it off to a state that I'd be happy with. Basically, I wanted to do like a graduation story where like one of V-Star's streamers would like leave the company and, you know, just sort of see how that affects everyone. Even though they still know each other in real life, it's still kind of emotional that, someone's leaving the company. The problem is that, like, I don't think that I can successfully write something like that and convey the sort of emotion that would be required without using an existing character from one of the other stories and making them be the one to leave. And I don't want to make my other characters be the ones to leave because I'm too attached to them. Anyway, there are a couple other stories within the realm of Cracks that don't have anything to do with Monster Island or V-Star. And they're sort of like a prophecy fulfilled, where it's a weird little sort of love story with a odd twist. Anyway, this one, I really need to come up with a better name for it. Simple Country Life. This one, wouldn't you know it, tired, worn down office worker. It's almost like that would be the exact pain graduating her own characters. Yeah. Anyway, more tired, worn down office workers. This one, her name is Luca. This is the only story here that has, like, absolutely no ties to Japan. Anyway, Luca, one night, a crack actually opens up inside her apartment, and she's like, what the hell is this? Stumbles through it, as you do, and then, as always happens, it closes behind her, leaving her trapped in what appears to be, like, the middle of the forest. She doesn't know where the hell she is, and then, oh look, a demon comes out of the woods. A succubus, to be specific. The succubus, like, explains what's going on, and like, oh yeah, this is another world, you just stepped through a crack between worlds. Like, it could reappear, but it might take a while. What? It's still the middle of the night, so why don't you come back to my little hut, and we can stay there the night. As it turns out, the demon is taking advantage of her. I'll leave it up to your imagination what exactly taking advantage of her means. Mainly because I don't want to discuss that on stream. But yeah, Luca ends up being captive for a while, up until one day she hears gunshots being fired at the cabin. The demon's like, well shit, the cops have found me. Time to escape. She gathers up her belongings and just teleports the fuck out of there. And then the person who'd been shooting comes up to the cabin. As it turns out, it was not the police. It was a local farmer who had come to the woods on a hunting trip and saw a cabin out here where there was supposed to be no one. So she immediately assumed that, like, okay, yeah, this is just some, like, what she describes as a feral person. Someone who has, like, takes issue with the way the government regulates the use of magic and, goes off into the wilderness by themselves in order to be able to do whatever they want without care for the law. So, her name's Cataline, and so she rescues Luca, explains that, like, yeah, cracks don't just, like, reappear in the same place. They're kind of random. You can't really track them unless you have specialized skills. How about, like, we go back to my farm, I'll call, the government agents or whatever, so they can arrange to bring you back to your world. And, we can sort that out. But maybe like, the demon, like, altered Luca's body a bit as well to suit her own purposes. It's like, yeah, we can take you to, like, a magic doctor or whatever to get you fixed up there as well. And so they go back. Luca eventually gets fixed up again. However, after staying on Cataline's farm for a bit, she begins to realize that she kind of prefers the quiet life in the country over her old busy city life. And so she wants to stay here. And like I mentioned, this is sort of like a little love story. The idea would be that, you know, like Luca would be very hesitant to open up again after what the demon did to her, but she and Cataline would eventually fall in love and it'd be cute. There are a lot of like cute lesbian stories that I make just because like girls cute. I want to write it. I want to write cute girls. Anyway, there's one more, which is another girls cute story. This is a stretch. Hold on. A stretch too far. This one doesn't feature someone falling through a crack, but the crack is still important. I second the motion, thank you, Chad. This one doesn't feature someone falling through the other side. Hold on, what's the character's name again? Mika. So, another tired, worn down office worker, Mika, she's heading to work one day when she hears a sound coming from a nearby alleyway. She decides, you know what, let's check it out, I guess, because apparently Mika has like zero self-preservation. She steps inside, no one's there. She has no idea what made the sound, but she finds a small, like, vial or a test tube on the ground. It's like, oh, this looks kind of neat. And so, being the kind of person that just picks up junk off the ground if it looks kind of neat, and, you know, collects it, because, I mean, that's the kind of shit I do sometimes. She's like, yeah, I'll take this with me. However, at some point, like, at the train station or something, she ends up, like, tripping while the vial is still in her hand. It ends up breaking, and she gets, like, whatever was in the vial gets all over her hands. She gets a few cuts here and there from the glass, but, like, it's nothing too major. She's like, okay, just wash my hands, put some bandages on it, we're fine. As it turns out, it wasn't fine, because whatever was in that vial, it does something weird to her body, and now she essentially has superpowers. You know frickin' what's-her-face, Mrs. Incredible? How she can stretch and stuff? Mika can now do that. Except she's not fully in control of it, because, you know, when you suddenly get superpowers, you're not exactly... you can't exactly figure out what the hell you're doing. And so it's sort of supposed... like, it starts off just sort of a silly... My brain is still working. I heard superpowers. Superpowers. Not superpowers. She can stretch her body and stuff. She's stretchy. So it starts off with just her, like, trying to hide her powers and, like, not be outed as, like, some sort of genetic freak or whatever. Eventually, like, her best friend finds out, and so she ends up helping with, like, trying to figure out how Mika's powers work and how to best, you know, hide them in day-to-day life. And eventually there's a romance angle because I thought it would be cute. And, yeah. So there's no real big major, like, climax or anything here. It's just a silly little story about developing and then hiding superpowers, because the rest of the world isn't ready for them yet. So that's the realm of cracks. Thankfully, the bottom row in this this chart of all my stories has significantly less stories in it. Like, frickin' these two by themselves, there's like 9 in here. I'm pretty sure the bottom row, which has like 6 slots there, there's only 8 stories. This had more than the entire bottom row does. So hopefully it'll go a little faster. Starting with the Realm of Heroes. So the Realm of Heroes is sort of like, what's this, my third medieval fantasy? My third medieval fantasy world? Except this one in particular was sort of inspired, at least at first, was inspired by Ruby. RWBY. I used to watch that, and like I sort of tried to adapt some of it into like a medieval fantasy setting sort of thing. Except then, like, the main story of the world, which was based on Ruby, ended up falling to the sidelines as I came up with a different story that I grew way more attached to. But technically, the main story of the world is Guild of Heroes, which I could use a significantly better name, but whatever. Oh, I should probably explain more about the setting. So, there are monsters in this world known as ghouls, and they are typically fought by people who are referred to as heroes. Heroes, like, they typically work for a guild, but some of them are freelance. And it's their job to essentially take jobs from the public, usually related to ghouls and getting rid of them. But, you know, they're the good guy people. They do good things. However, most of the time, at least after a certain stage in their heroism, heroes will unlock their hero spirit, which can, like, sort of help shield them from damage, as well as unlocking their what's referred to as their fate, which is like a special power that they can activate that like drains their stamina, which is also the source of their hero spirit. But that's essentially what's going on here. Guild of Heroes is the one that's inspired by the story of Ruby. We start off with a pair of sisters, Sylvia and Carmen, I believe was her name. Sylvia has just reached the age where she's finally allowed to apply for like officially registering as a hero. Because like she and her sister have been like venturing around like dungeons and whatnot, searching for legendary artifacts and whatnot, but she wasn't allowed to officially become a hero just yet. But now she is, and she wants to. And she doesn't just want to join a guild. She's shopped around. None of the guilds really suit what she wants to do. So she wants to form her own guild. Problem, you need at least 4 members in order to register as an official guild. So she goes to this place where like there's people who like they want to start a guild, and they're just sort of looking for partners that they can work with in order to start one. She and Carmen meet up with a girl from one of the 12 beast tribes of the Guild of Heroes, a warrior from the tiger tribe named Fern, who's like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll join you. You guys seem cool enough. No one else asked me, so everyone's usually too intimidated by me, because I'm like part tiger and whatnot. And then who steps in? It's the frickin' princess of the kingdom, who has come here because she wants experience as a hero before, you know, she ultimately takes the throne, so that she knows how to best serve the people and whatnot. Everyone there's like, they're too intimidated. They're too like awestruck and like, holy shit, it's the princess, like what the fuck do we do? Sylvia has no idea who this lady is and just walks up like, hey, you seem pretty cool, wanna join our guild? We're looking for like a 4th member. So the princess, I believe I named her Jasmine, she's like, you know what, yeah, sure, you're the first person that asked, why not? And so they go and do their qualification test or whatever, and they form their own guild. And then I guess there's evil stuff that happens and whatnot, but like, I guess I didn't plan that far ahead. They take on missions and defeat ghouls and such and forth. The one that I have more investment in is currently just named Drained. You want to know why I'm more invested in this one? Because the protagonist is a trans lesbian vampire hunter, and if that's not cool, I don't know what is. So Drained, our protagonist, is a woman named Citrine. Citrine, part of her like becoming a hero, most heroes, you know, they just want to do the right thing. Citrine had an ulterior motive along with that. She wanted to transition. You know, like she was assigned male at birth, but she wanted, you know, to find some sort of relic that would allow her body to match the way she felt inside. And what she found was a vampire-like ghoul who had been terrorizing a certain town. But rather than draining people's blood, it would drain their masculinity. So she's like, oh, this is perfect. She accepts the mission to go and defeat him. On the way, she meets a man named Russet, who claims to be the vampire's son, and is just like, yeah, like, he tries to warn her, as like, yeah, no one who's entered that castle has come out alive. Are you sure you want to do this? Like, yeah, I have a mission to do. Like, okay, if you want to do this, go through the back door. It's like mostly unguarded. You can skip most of the castle. Like, oh, okay, thanks. So she does that. Russet's advice turns out to be good. She manages to make it to the throne room without much trouble. And there's the vampire. She engages him in battle. Most of the, like, she's like actively putting up a fight. And then, like, at some point during the battle, her cloak is torn off, and the vampire sees like, oh, you're a man. I see. So ultimately, like, the battle seems to be going good, but then he manages to get the better of her. I was like, yes, now it's time for me to feed, and he bites her neck, transforming her body into, you know, one that, you know, appears more, you know, female. And then, in the most metal move I've ever created, she's like, yeah, thanks for that, I don't need you anymore, pulls out a crossbow, and fires a stake through his heart while his fangs are still in her neck. Citrine is badass. She's probably the most badass character I've ever created. But yeah, so it's like medieval shotgun. So, you know, that kills the vampire. And so, Russet ultimately comes back. It's like, yeah, thanks for that. The reason I was out the front, you know, warning you about all this, I don't agree with the shit my dad's been doing. I may be a ghoul, but I have morals. So ultimately, in sort of a fucking like Alucard situation, Russet ends up like feeling indebted to Citrine for killing his father. I was like, yeah, you need someone to like help you with like whatever missions you go on. I'm happy to help. And so the pair of them end up like joining up as partners and whatnot for future missions. And like eventually, this isn't part of like the first story within Drained, but like eventually Citrine would go on to like realize like, yeah, there are actually a decent number of ghouls that actually aren't mindless killing machines, and they do have morals. So she forms her own guild where not only humans and the beast tribes are welcome, but like even ghouls, as long as they're good people, are welcome there. Which I think is pretty neat. Also, she encountered there are alongside, like, including the one that she killed, that inadvertently helped her transition. She's killed like at least 3 vampires, and she works with like 2. So she didn't even set out to become a vampire hunter. It just sort of happened. But yeah. That's the Realm of Heroes. I care significantly more about Drained than I do Guild of Heroes, but I do still need to develop Guild of Heroes a bit, since it's supposed to be the main story of the world. What if they met with other characters? Oh yeah, Multiverse, yeah. Anyway, we have one more that has more than one story in it, and then the rest are all just single story. We have the Realm of Transformation. Now I'm gonna say up front, I don't think that in the current climate of our world, I don't think I could write this one. Because I'm going to explain what its deal is. However, I feel like transphobes and whatnot are gonna would look at this and go like, ha, they're forcing it upon us. They're forcefully transing our kids, or whatever. And then trans people and trans allies are gonna look at it and go like, bro, what the fuck is this? Why are you demonizing trans people or whatever? And then people who lie somewhere in the middle are gonna look at it and go like, is this a fucking fetish or something? So the idea behind the Realm of Transformation is that, so magic exists, but in a fairly limited quantity. And the easiest kind of magic to perform is transformation magic, turning a person into a something else. Eventually, people without magic is like, well, I want to do that. And so they developed scientific ways to do that, using like substances called transformatives. But as they began to be more widespread, they began to be used for things like revenge. Like, oh, someone wrong you, just turn them into a frog or something. The problem is that the human body is kind of fragile, and it can only handle being transformed once before it just rejects all transformatives. Any transformation is permanent. So like that, it's basically if someone decides to target you, you lose your old body forever. And so these transformation crimes, even though like the police still don't really know how to handle them, and as a result, we get our main protagonists, members of the TIA, a independent, like a private detective agency who specializes in investigating transformation crimes to find the culprit behind them. Because the person who founded the TIA was actually the victim of a transformation crime that was never solved. So they're like, well, I don't want anyone to have to deal with that. And so the reason I say that, like, I don't think I can do this in the current climate of the world is that a lot of the crimes are basically like someone being forcefully transformed from like male to female or female to male. And that could be seen by some people as a parallel to being transgender when it's really not. There are canon transgender characters within the Realm of Transformation, but the transformations themselves that are used in the crimes are not supposed to be parallels to that. but I can very much see how people would think they are, and that's why I don't want to write this until the world gets a little nicer towards trans people. Anyway, there are two types of stories here. I'm sort of calling them TIA case files and TIA declassified. So TIA case files, volume 1 and 2. Isn't it like the episode since they were forced to transform? Yeah. Yeah, they are like forced to transform. So it's very much not, being transgender. However, transphobes, their current narrative is that we're forcing it upon kids, We're forcing their kids to become trans, and we're infecting them with our ideology and whatnot. So, if I write this story where people are literally being forced to transform, that's kind of that's exactly what they're saying we're doing, just in a more fantasy version. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't write this. Yeah. So the case file stories are sort of like a collection of smaller cases that are sort of plotted out like an Ace Attorney game, where I don't know, Drew, I'm done. Yeah. Maybe I'm worrying over nothing, but I'm just concerned about how it would be viewed by the public, Anyway, the case file stories are sort of arranged sort of like an Ace Attorney game, where you've got 5 separate cases. They sort of influence from one to the next, but for the most part the mysteries are contained to each case, and you just solve one case after the next. The first, the volume 1 is while they are mostly disconnected cases, there's a small running plotline of the Phantom Duelist, someone who's transforming people using trading cards or something. Oh no, what's going on? And so it just comes up every now and then throughout the other cases, up until the final case where you actually have to try and catch the characters have to try and catch the Phantom Duelist. While Volume 2 would have cases that are a bit more poignant to the backstories of the individual members of the TIA. For example, case 1 takes place somewhere that the main dude often visited. Case 2 kind of plays on one of the characters having a fear of ghosts. That sort of thing. And then along with case files, there's also TIA declassified, which would be one story for one individual larger case, with the one that currently exists being the Brotherhood of Ilya. So, within the Brotherhood of Ilya, it's another cult story. Why do I have multiple stories related to cults? Who knows? But the main character, not the main person of the TIA, but the main character of the Brotherhood of Ilya ends up getting kidnapped by the cult and essentially transformed and brainwashed to be a new recruit for them. To essentially they're trying to see if they can expand their ranks without whittling down, without having to find true believers or whatever. And so as part of their initiation, they're sort of sent to assassinate someone, but as it turns out, the brainwashing wasn't as thorough as they thought. Because the person that they were essentially testing the limits of their brainwashing by sending the protagonist, I believe their name. Oh yeah, their name was also Alex. I've got two Alexes apparently. Anyway, Alex is sent out to essentially kill their girlfriend, who they'd forgotten about because of the brainwashing. However, once they see her, they're like, all the memories come rushing back, they're in control again. And so they report it all to the police. The police are like, okay, cool, thanks for letting us know what the Brotherhood's doing. We'll let you know if there are any updates. Because the police have no fucking clue how to handle the Brotherhood. They don't even know where to find the Brotherhood. So, Alex ultimately ends up, like, accepting their new body. They're, like, fine with it. Happy with it, even, maybe. But they still want revenge on the Brotherhood, not for transforming them, but for sending them off to kill their girlfriend. So they end up going to the TIA. Is like, hey, the police can't help me. I know this technically isn't a transformation crime that we're dealing with, but can you help me track down the Brotherhood so I can take revenge and, like, bring them down? Like, you know what? Sure, let's do that. And that's about as far as I've got with how the story's supposed to take place. I don't know how they actually end up bringing them down in the end. Revenge, violence. Alright. We have 4 more worlds, and they each only hold a single story. So, we're reaching the end now. They have to transform themselves. Alright. The Realm of the Other, which is probably one of the worst world names I have, but don't worry about it. So I mentioned, when I was going through the Realm of Data, I mentioned that it was one of the worlds that was inspired by my vague understanding of a Persona game. The Realm of the Other is the other one. This one is inspired by my vague understanding of Persona 4. With, like, people getting thrown into the TV world and, like, getting and dying because of it or whatever. Within the Realm of the Other, there is an alternate parallel world called the Otherworld. Because I'm terrible at naming things. The Otherworld is sort of like hell, and there's demons known as Otherlings living within it, but it's all just sort of weird and twisted and almost alien. Like, it's not your typical hell. It's just weird. The main character, Jacqueline, and one of her friends, they end up, like, falling in there by accident, and they discover that within the Otherworld, those with a strong will are able to wield that will to essentially defeat the Otherlings within there. But more than that, they can use that will to convert Otherlings into familiars. Essentially, you know, taking the monsters and catching them. Because it's also a monster catcher. Persona, but monster catcher. They eventually manage to escape the Otherworld, and then they find, like, someone else who has also been going into the Otherworld. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, I've been trying to figure this shit out. Why don't you join me now that you're aware of this place? Like, I think it has something to do with the mysterious disappearances that have been happening around campus. To be fair, Shin Megami Tensei Persona is kind of like Pokemon demons, yeah. Except mine aren't like actual demons, they're just weird shit that I came up with. I just call them demons. But yeah, they ultimately find someone who can essentially act as their guide, who, like, she's one of the otherlings. She's a demon, but also she's part of, like, a race of demons that are more intelligent than the others, and, like, they're powerful enough that they just don't fucking care about this shit. Like, Like, oh, you're human? Cool. You want to fight? Nah. And so she essentially acts as their guide, explains that, like, if they want to get rid of the link between their university and the other world, they'd need to go in and defeat the boss otherlings that are creating these portals. And so that's what they do. And as they go, they, like, end up, like, meeting more party members from other people who have gotten dragged into the other world. And at the same time, they investigate the mysterious disappearances that have been happening with students vanishing around the campus. And that's Otherworld. I think I mainly created it because I wanted to have another monster catcher game. Do they make friends with that one special other that can speak human language? Yeah. Well, some of them would probably consider her a friend. Others, they'd just consider her their guide. She's sort of indifferent about it. She doesn't join the party. She just sort of sits back like, yeah, that you need to go there. Have fun. Don't die. I think I created the other world because I wanted another monster catching world, but the realm of creatures was very much designed around, like, Pokemon, and having each of the monsters be, like, natural animals. I wanted the realm of the other to be something different, with, like, the catchable monsters being more like just weird fantasy creatures, I guess. And so I went with them being demons. Even though some of them are, like, just frickin' cartoon shit. Anyway, that's the realm of the other. Moving on to the realm of the deep. The realm of the deep, I'm just gonna quickly mention, back up in the realm of Nexus. When I was creating Nexus Village, along with the main character, since it was sort of envisioned as a gacha type thing, I wanted to create, like, one original character for each of the main elements. However, the original character I created for the water element, I got so attached to her, the idea of her world, that I was like, okay, no, your world isn't dead. I'm bringing your world to life and replacing you with someone else in that story. And her world is the realm of the deep. The realm of the deep is from a sort of, like, distant future in which, I guess the ice caps have melted or something, or maybe a meteor containing a shitload of water hit the Earth. Regardless, the sea levels have risen so fucking high that there is no longer any visible land on Earth. It's just a giant ocean. And so humans now live on floating settlements or just on boats. And that's just how they live now. They've managed to eke out a living on the small settlements that they can... Water worlds! That they've managed to put together. And that's where our story comes in. The deep below. Because, again, I'm not good at coming up with names. The deep below follows a salvager by the name of Eliza. Salvagers, their job is essentially to dive down to the ocean floor to rummage for useful materials left behind by human civilization when the Earth flooded. So that's her job. She just goes around collecting stuff. And so one day, after trading in some materials at a nearby settlement, she happens to run into one of her salvager friends, Rodrigo, who, while Eliza's very, pretty serious, all business-minded and whatnot, just get it done. Rodrigo, like, he has ambitions of finding, like, lost civilizations and whatnot, and, like, treasure and all that sort of stuff. He's a lot more eccentric. And his most recent ambition, he's looking for the lost city of Atlantis. Supposedly, there's like tales of a city at the bottom of the ocean that it's still a bustling. There's still people living there. Like, don't be ridiculous, Rodrigo. Everyone lives on the surface. We all live on these settlements and whatnot. There's no way anyone could be living down there. But Rodrigo's he's convinced there's gotta be something there. As it turns out, he does actually find something. There is a city at the bottom of the ocean. But Rodrigo kind of gets into trouble while trying to find it, and Eliza has to bail him out. And that's basically where the story takes us, to not, to not give everything away. That's basically what's going on with the Deep Below. I tried to make a game out of this one too, and while I got the mechanics working fine, I don't think I could have... like, I don't know, maybe I could have done something with it. I don't know if I could, don't know if I could have made a whole game out of it, and, like, actually told a story with it or whatever. But hey, at least my multiverse now has a variety of different types of fish. I hope there's aliens. Oh boy. I mean, the bottom of the sea is the closest thing to outer space, as they say. I don't know who they is, but they definitely say it. Two left. The Realm of Imagination. So this one came about when I was like, it's the aliens. So the Realm of Imagination came about when I was like trying to come up with like sort of a weird abstract idea for a game that steadily became less abstract as it went. Generally speaking, it's just a normal-ass world. It has a different, like, art style, but it's kind of just a normal world. So let's just dive into the actual story. Imagine. All lowercase, full stop. The way, the case is very important. So Imagine follows a young author, or aspiring author, by the name of Yew, Y-E-W. I thought I was being clever by naming the player character Yew, but really it just makes things confusing to talk about her. She really wants to like write this like epic fantasy novel or whatever, but she lacks, like, she has an overactive imagination that often causes problems for her in real life. She's also sort of racked by anxiety, which is only made worse by her imagination. It sort of blows up tiny little problems into massive fucking ordeals. Like, the very first one, it's like, her summer break's over, she barely got to work on her novel at all. Because the problem is, with her anxiety, she tends to stay home most of the time. She has very little real-world experience to pull from when it comes to her writing. So, like, she may... Oh boy, anxiety, never had that. Yeah, me neither. Yeah, so, like, her summer break ends, and so she's off to work. However, during her break, a stray dog has decided to make its home on the route she usually takes to work. And, gets angry at her, like, starts barking at her to, defend its territory. But while it's just like a small dog, in Yu's mind, like, it blows up to this giant hulking beast that wants to tear her limb from limb. And so she freaks out and has to take a long road to the bus stop. And so when this was a game idea, like, my idea was that you'd guide Yu around the city to try and get her more life experience. And then once you've gotten more, like, experiences, you can then use those experiences to try and help you imagine a way out of the situation that she's imagined herself into. However, as a story, I'd kind of like to keep that experimental nature and have it sort of be like a wordless picture book, a story without words. I think, like, I studied one of those in high school. I want to say it was called the... Hold on, let me look it up just to make sure I'm not making a fool of myself. Was it The Arrival? Let me see. Yeah, The Arrival. I thought that was, like, a real neat idea, being able to tell an entire story without using any words. And that's sort of what I would want to do with Imagine. To just sort of see the world through Yu's eyes and not have to use any actual words to tell the story. And if there's any world that I can actually, make a picture book or a graphic novel with, it'd be the realm of imagination. The art style is very simple. So I don't know, maybe that'll be a thing one day. And then we finally get to the last world I ever created. As someone who totally never at any time has definitely never been trapped in their own anxious imaginations, this is very totally not terrifying. Oh no. Oh no. Alright. It's time for the last world. Originally, Imagine was supposed to be my last world. And then before that, I think The Other was supposed to be my last world. And then before that, The Deep was supposed to be my last world. And then before that, it was something else. Because I think I stopped at 12, and I was like, yeah, 12's a good number to stop at. And then I thought, I came up with plot twist that there is no last world. Then I came up with that. Then I came up with that character, Eliza, and was like, okay, I want to make something out of her world. So The Deep became a thing. And then I came up with the idea for The Other, because I couldn't fit this in any of my other worlds. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this can be its own world. 14's a nice round number. And then I came up with, was it Imagine? 14? There's probably another one that I'm forgetting that came between some of these. Because then Imagine became number 16, and I'm like, yeah, perfect. 16. Good number. That's like the number of characters in a Danganronpa game. It's perfect. But then, as I was writing my frickin' Danganronpa-inspired novel, I came up with the realm of recipes. And it was so fucking stupid, and I loved it. And I'm like, okay, 17. That's where we're ending. It's a weird number to end at. 20 sounds like a good number too. No. I have been good about it ever since the realm of recipes was created. I've come up with so many stories since this one, but I've always managed to find a way to work it into one of my existing worlds. Like, off the top of my head, a stretch too far. V-Star Revival and V-Star Origins. The Stream Begins. Frost, AI Live, Virtual Neverland. These were all things that I came up with after I created the Realm of Recipes. But I was good about it. Instead of creating a brand new world in order to fit them in, I looked at my existing set of worlds and was like, that one, it works there. And so that's just how I've been doing it now. I've decided this is the limit. This is, and there is actually lore-based reasons why this is the limit. And it has to do with these stories in the realm of question marks. However, I won't go into that. However, that is why I refuse to make any more worlds beyond the realm of recipes. But this one was just too silly and it would not work in any other world. So I'm like, okay, this one stays. This is the final world with its story. A recipe for disaster. So, the idea behind the realm of recipes, only 17 question marks were created by the ancient ones. So, the idea behind the realm of recipes is that in this world, the phrase, putting your heart and soul into your cooking, it's not just a saying. Talented chefs are able to summon food spirits, the embodiment of their culinary arts, who are able to aid with the chef's cooking and whatnot. However, they also have combat abilities and can face off against rogue food spirits or whatever. I know this sounds ridiculous. Let me get through it. However, the good food requires souls. However, the culinary world is also rather corrupt, and as certain chefs rose to power with their incredibly strong food spirits, they began to wipe out. They began to be very controlling about who could use them and who could not. If a new upcoming chef threatened their business, they would simply wipe the floor with them, destroy their ability to use food spirits and to summon them, and turn them back into just an ordinary chef. These all-powerful chefs with their super strong food spirits would let the power go to their head. No longer were they chefs working alongside the spirits, rather they were controlling them like slaves. This corruption could not go on. Enter our protagonist, a waitress named Saffron, who on her 21st birthday, one of the presents she receives is a freaking juicer. So, she decides, hey, sure, let's make some juice, I guess. So she makes apple juice. The next morning, she wakes up to find a strange man sitting at the edge of her bed. After freaking out, he explains that he is apple juice, the food spirit of the juice she made the night before. As it turns out, she has unlocked the power to summon food spirits, which she doesn't understand at all because she doesn't even know how to cook. That doesn't make any sense. Only super talented chefs are supposed to be able to do this. Apple Juice doesn't know how the hell she managed to do it, but he begs her, you must destroy the corruption in the culinary industry. You have been chosen or something. The juice is so... And Saffron ultimately agrees to go along with it, solely because Apple Juice, or AJ as she decides to call him, he promises to teach her how to cook in exchange for helping to destroy the corruption in the culinary industry and set free the food spirits that had long since been held captive. And it's an entirely ridiculous story idea. And that's kind of the point. Saffron is cursed with genre awareness. She's aware of how absolutely ridiculous the idea is. And she's not having any of it. You know the fucking Marvel MCU humor? Oh, that just happened. Yeah, that's Saffron. She's like, what the fuck? This makes no sense. This is like the plot out of a bad video game. Meanwhile, everyone else around her is taking it completely seriously. And so, I don't know. The idea for this came, like, I think I saw a bit of, like, fan art or something for a game called Food Fantasy or whatever. And so after, that looks cool, what is it? And so I looked it up, and it's apparently a gacha game where you summon, like, the fucking spirits of different, like, they're the personification of different food dishes. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so that inspired a recipe for disaster. I don't know, like, anything about food fantasy besides the general concept that the characters are, like, the personification of food. But that inspired a recipe for disaster, and now it's a thing. And I don't know. I find this one to be real fun. That's why I made an exception for it to allow it to be part of the multiverse, even after I'd cut myself off from creating more worlds. I summoned the fried chicken spirit. But yeah, it's just a very silly idea. My plate's... It's a very silly idea that I kind of like... I want to, like, acknowledge the fact that it's silly while also having, like, the rest of the characters treat it very seriously. But yeah, that... Stop interrupting. No worries. We're actually done. Behold. All the stories that currently exist within my multiverse. Let me move to the side a bit so you can see the bottom one. Ta-da! This is everything that currently exists. Will there be more in the future? Most likely, because I never fucking stop. I don't know when to stop. This is already more than I can probably write in my entire lifetime. And yet I continue to make more. Because I just can't stop myself from making new characters and plotlines. At the very least, what it does mean is that whenever I finish whatever story I'm working on at the time, I have plenty to choose from for what I want to write next. So yeah. Keep going, yeah. So there. Now I have a VOD of me explaining all of my worlds and all of the plots within them. So whenever I get around to doing that, that stream of me drawing people as characters from my worlds, I have a reference point people can use for, like, what to expect from various worlds. If people want to know about my writing, I have a reference point that they can use to look at and see, you know, what they'd be interested in. I can send this and go like, hey, like, what sort of stories do you want me to write next? After I finish what I'm writing, what would you be interested in? That sort of thing. But yeah, that's all I wanted to do in today's stream. And it has taken us almost 4 hours to get through all of my stories. I hope y'all enjoyed. This probably means nothing to, like, anyone besides me, but I'm happy I got it out there. This is what I meant when I said that today's stream is all about me. You know? Let me Let's go back to the chatting screen now. Because, oh boy. Hold on, let me move my microphone now that I don't need to have my drawing tablet in front of me. Ba-da-ba. But yeah, me time is a good time. Or you time. But yeah, that is every story. That is every story that currently exists within my multiverse. And I don't know, I had a fun time just sort of like getting to show off everything. So that maybe when I start rambling about things on Twitter, people might have a reference point for what the fuck I'm talking about. Thank you for the redeems, Chad. There it is. I used to have a redeem that was Ramble's story, and it was just like, oh, just redeem that and I'll talk about one of the stories in my multiverse. I've now removed that. It is no longer necessary, because I've already gone through all of them now. Okay, 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This stream is that whole redeem. This is one that I've done before, but it's been ages, so. Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi? I hope she made lots of spaghetti. Luigi, look, it's from Bowser. Dear pesky plumbers, the Koopalings and I have taken over the Mushroom Kingdom. The princess is now a permanent guest at one of my 7 Koopa hotels. I dare you to find her if you can. We gotta find the princess. And you gotta help us. If you need instructions on how to get through the hotels, check out the enclosed instruction book. Hotel Mario! Yay! It's so silly. Anyway, this was fun, but I haven't had lunch yet, and it's almost 1 o'clock, so let's have a quick look and see if anyone's online that I want to raid. There are a lot of people online, holy shit. Oh, PK's online. Oh wait, Miko? Miko's online. Let's raid Miko, actually. I know most of you are probably already over there, however, it's Miko. Da 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 da. Here's the raid messages I didn't forget this time. Thanks for streaming, no worries, Theo. Thanks for the raid earlier. And for sticking around the whole time, even if, you were mostly lurking. I hope you enjoyed. So yeah, next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. Streaming on Saturday and Sunday, probably back to Genosha and Fire Emblem. This was a fun weekend. I'm glad I did this. Now that I've done this, it does feel more like my birthday, you know? Thursday, it didn't really feel like it. Now it definitely feels like it. So I'm glad I did this. Anyway, we're gonna raid Miko. Thanks for watching. Otsukame. Bye bye and scene. I just realized I didn't mute desktop audio, so you probably heard Miko for a bit. Oops.